Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos. After the main character dies in his previous life due to a truck, he wakes up inside of the world of Game of Thrones with the ability to create a dinosaur kingdom. His dog, who is named Max in his previous life, died with him and is reincarnated as the Indominus Rex.
Got reborn with Indomius Rex, create Dinosaur Kingdom. Chapter 1, A Second Beginning. I woke up the same way I always did, staring at the ceiling, letting my eyes adjust before I moved. The room was quiet. No alarms, no sudden noise. Just the usual calm. I stretched my arm across the bed and felt the familiar weight shift beside me. Max. His tail thumped once against the mattress the moment he noticed I was awake. Yeah, I'm up, I said with a small grin, my voice still rough. He let out a soft bark, then pushed his head into my side like he always did. Same routine. Same energy. It grounded me every morning. I scratched behind his ears and sat up slowly. Big day today, I said lightly. We're getting pizza tonight. Max tilted his head slightly. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. That was enough for him. His tail sped up. I stood, stretched again, then walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Normal sky. Normal light. Nothing unusual. That was how the day started. Simple. Easy. Good. I got dressed, grabbed the leash, and Max was already at the door before I even called him. He was always like that when he sensed a walk coming. You're too predictable, I said with a quiet laugh as I clipped the leash onto his collar. He barked once in response, excited, ready. We stepped outside together. The air felt fresh. Cool, but not cold. The kind of weather that made everything feel lighter. I took a deep breath and started walking down the street, Max pacing beside me, occasionally pulling slightly before correcting himself. I kept a relaxed pace. No rush. No stress. Tonight's gonna be good, I said casually. We'll get the big one. Extra cheese. Maybe pepperoni. Max glanced up at me, tongue slightly out, like he was following along. Yeah, I know you'll try to steal a slice, I added. He wagged harder. We walked past the usual houses, the same people, the same quiet neighborhood. Everything felt stable. Predictable. I liked that. I didn't need anything complicated. I reached the corner and paused for a moment before crossing. Max shifted slightly, looking ahead, alert but calm. Then. A sound. Loud. Wrong. My head turned before I could think. A truck. Too fast. Too close. For a split second, everything slowed. I felt the leash tighten in my hand. I saw Max's body tense. I didn't get the chance to react. The impact came fast and hard. There was no pain I could process. No clear thought. Just force. Then nothing. Darkness. No sound. No movement. I didn't know how long I was there. Time didn't exist in any way I could measure. No hunger. No sleep. No sense of my body. Just awareness. I didn't panic. I didn't feel scared. I just existed. And then, slowly, something changed. A shift. Like waking up without realizing you had been asleep. My eyes opened. I inhaled sharply. Air. Real air. I pushed myself up from the ground immediately, steady, no hesitation. My body responded like it always had. I looked around. Trees. Tall, thick, unfamiliar. The forest stretched in every direction. The ground was uneven, covered in dirt and roots. No buildings. No roads. No signs of anything modern. I stood up fully and brushed dirt off my clothes, checking myself quickly. Everything felt normal. No injuries. No weakness. I turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. This isn't, I started, then stopped. Before I could finish the thought. A sound. Clear. Sharp. Ding. I blinked once. Then again. A faint panel appeared in front of me. Not physical, but visible. Welcome, host, to the world of Game of Thrones. I stared at it for a second. Then I said, flatly, come again. The panel didn't change. A second line appeared. After death in your previous life, you have been selected as a host. I crossed my arms slightly, looking at it carefully. All right, I said calmly. That's new. Another line. You have been granted the Dinosaur system. I paused. Then I smiled. Okay, I said, a little more interested now. Now you have my attention. The panel shifted again. A starter gift pack is available. I let out a small breath through my nose. Of course there is. I didn't hesitate. Open it. There was a brief pause. Then. Starter gift pack opened. You have received, Indominus Rex. I blinked. That's not small, I said. Before I could say anything else. Additional notice, the soul of Max has been placed within the Indominus Rex. I froze. Completely still. What? I said quietly. The forest stayed silent. Then. A low, heavy sound. Movement. I turned my head slowly. Something massive stepped out from between the trees. White scales. Large frame. Controlled movement. The Indominus Rex. It stopped a short distance away from me. Its eyes locked onto mine. I didn't move. Then. Its head tilted slightly. The same way Max used to do. My expression shifted immediately. Max. I said. The creature let out a low sound and took a slow step forward. No aggression. No tension. Just recognition. I walked toward him without hesitation, my pace steady. When I reached him, I raised my hand and placed it against his snout. Warm. Alive. Real. He leaned into the touch slightly. I let out a short breath and smiled. Yeah, that's you. His tail moved behind him, slower than before, but it moved. I scratched along the side of his jaw, adjusting to the scale of him. You got big, I said lightly. He made a low, pleased sound. I stayed there for a moment, just keeping my hand on him. No rush. No confusion anymore. Everything had already been answered. New world. New system. Max was still with me. That was enough. I pulled my hand back and looked around again. All right, I said casually. Let's figure things out. Another panel appeared. Complete missions to earn rewards. Rewards include new dinosaur acquisitions via randomized selection. I nodded once. So I do tasks, I get more dinosaurs. Correct. Simple enough. I glanced back at Max. He stood behind me, massive and calm, watching everything. I reached up and tapped his side lightly. You're staying close. He huffed softly. Good. I started walking forward through the forest, stepping carefully over roots and uneven ground. Max followed without needing direction, his steps heavy but controlled. As I moved, I ran through everything I knew. Game of Thrones. Westeros. Kings, houses, war, politics. I knew the timeline. I knew the major events. I knew where things would go wrong and who would cause it. That knowledge sat clearly in my mind. Useful. Very useful. But first, we need to know where we are, I said. Max stayed close to my side. I adjusted my direction slightly, heading toward where the trees seemed thinner. If we're in the north, it's colder, I said. If we're near the Crownlands, we'll find roads faster. Max let out a quiet sound as he walked. I glanced at him. Yeah, we'll figure it out. I kept my pace steady, my eyes scanning everything. No panic. No hesitation. Just moving forward. Chapter 2, Roads and Rumors. The trees began to thin after a while. I kept my pace steady, pushing aside low branches when needed, stepping over roots without breaking rhythm. Max followed behind me at first, then gradually shifted to my side, matching my speed without needing any signal. Even with his size, he moved quietly when he wanted to. The weight of each step was controlled. Measured. Good, I said softly, glancing at him. You're getting it. He made a low sound in response, something calm and familiar. The forest opened up ahead, and I slowed slightly as I spotted a dirt road cutting through the land. It wasn't paved, just packed earth with wagon tracks pressed deep into it. Signs of frequent use. I raised a hand slightly toward Max. He stopped immediately. I nodded once. Stay here. He didn't argue. He lowered his body slightly, shifting back into the trees, his white scales blending just enough with shadow and distance to avoid attention. I took a few steps forward alone, moving toward the edge of the road. Voices. Distant at first, then clearer. I adjusted my posture, relaxed my expression, and stepped out just enough to be seen as another traveler if anyone looked closely. A wagon approached from the left, pulled by 2 tired horses. 3 men walked alongside it. Their clothes were rough, worn, practical. Northern. I watched them as they got closer. Telling you, it lit up the whole damn bay, one of them said, shaking his head. Wildfire, another replied, his tone uneasy. Green flames. Ships went up like kindling. My attention sharpened. I stayed still, listening. The imp did it, the first man continued. Blew Stannis' fleet apart. Half of them gone in one blast. Half ain't all, the third man muttered. Word is the fighting's still going on. King's Landing's a mess either way. I kept my face neutral, but the information settled cleanly into place. Battle of Blackwater. Already underway. No delay. No uncertainty. Right on schedule. I let out a small breath through my nose. All right, I murmured under my breath. The wagon passed by without much attention. One of the men gave me a brief glance, then looked away just as quickly. I didn't stand out. Good. I stepped back from the road and turned, walking calmly into the trees again. Max lifted his head the moment I came back into view. I raised a hand and gave a small wave. All clear. He stood up fully and walked toward me, each step controlled despite his size. When he reached me, he lowered his head slightly, watching my face. Well, I said, resting my hand against his snout, we've got our answer. He made a quiet sound. It's already happening, I continued, my tone casual but focused. Battle of Blackwater. Wildfire just went off. Max blinked slowly. Yeah, I added, scratching lightly along his jaw. Big green explosion. You would have liked it. His tail shifted slightly behind him. I stepped back and looked at him properly. Things are moving fast, I said. Which means we don't have time to wander around. I turned slightly, glancing in the direction of the road again. King's Landing is chaos right now, I said. Stannis is attacking. Tyrion's defending. Joffrey's, being Joffrey. Max huffed quietly. I smirked a little. Yet, you wouldn't like him either. I placed a hand against Max's side, then moved along his body, looking for a good position. All right, I said, more upbeat now. Let's try something. He stayed still as I climbed up, using the ridges along his body for support. It took a bit of adjustment, but I got myself settled across his back, gripping firmly. Comfortable enough, I said. Max shifted slightly beneath me, adjusting his stance to balance my weight. I patted his side once. Okay, big guy. Let's move. He didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, then picked up speed gradually, moving through the forest with more confidence now. From up here, everything felt different. Higher. Clearer. I could see over brush, track movement better, plan routes faster. This is definitely better, I said with a small grin. Max let out a low, pleased rumble as he moved. We didn't head toward the road again. No reason to risk being seen up close like this. Instead, I angled us parallel to it, keeping distance while still following its general direction. King's Landing is south, I said, thinking out loud. Too far to reach immediately, even with you. Max continued forward steadily. And showing up there like this, I added, glancing down at him, would cause a bit of a problem. He made a soft huff. Yeah, just a bit. I adjusted my position slightly, leaning forward just enough to stay balanced as he moved faster. Leaves brushed past us. Branches snapped under his weight when he didn't bother avoiding them. I didn't mind. We need information first, I said. Real information. Not just rumors. Max kept moving. And we need to stay out of sight, I added. At least for now. I paused for a second, then tapped his side lightly. Slow down a bit. He obeyed immediately, reducing his speed without any resistance. I nodded. Good. We continued like that for a while. Quiet movement. Steady pace. My mind stayed active, running through everything I knew. The battle would continue into the night. Tyrion would lead the defense at the walls. The Hound would lose his nerve because of the fire. Joffrey would retreat. Tywin would arrive with the Tyrell forces and crush Stannis' army from the rear. All of it already set in motion. I rested one hand against Max's back, grounding myself slightly. Nothing we need to interfere with there, I said. That plays out fine on its own. Max didn't respond, but his movement stayed steady. North is more important later, I continued. Robb, the war, everything that follows. I trailed off slightly, then shook my head once. Step by step. Max's head tilted slightly as he walked. I smiled a little. Yet. One thing at a time. After a while, I raised my hand again. Stop. He came to a halt immediately. I listened. Faint movement again. Different from before. Not a wagon this time. Footsteps. Multiple. I slid down from Max's back quietly and motioned for him to stay. He lowered himself slightly, staying behind the thicker part of the trees. I moved forward alone again, careful with each step. Through the trees, I spotted them. 5 men. Armed. Not soldiers. No banners. No formation. Rough gear. Bandits. They stood near the road, talking among themselves. Heard there's refugees heading south, one of them said. Easy pickings. Long as they don't have guards, another replied. I watched them for a few seconds. No discipline. Loose spacing. Weapons drawn casually. I stepped back slowly and returned to Max. He looked at me immediately. 5 of them, I said quietly. Not organized. He let out a low sound. I placed a hand on his snout again. Quick and clean, I said. No noise. His posture shifted instantly. Focused. Ready. I climbed back onto his back and leaned forward slightly. Go. He moved. Fast. Not loud at first, just controlled speed through the trees. Then he broke through. The bandits didn't even get time to react properly. One of them turned, eyes widening. Too late. Max hit the first man with a single motion, knocking him aside hard enough that he didn't get back up. The others shouted, scrambling, weapons coming up in panic. I stayed low, holding on as Max moved through them. No hesitation. No wasted movement. It was over quickly. I didn't say anything during it. Just watched. Measured. When it was done, Max stood still, breathing steady. I slid down again and walked forward, checking briefly. No survivors. I nodded once. Good, I said simply. Max looked at me. I reached up and patted his side. You did great. His tail moved slightly. I glanced toward the road again, then back at the forest. Let's keep moving, I said. I climbed back up, settling into position again. Max turned and continued forward without needing direction. The forest stretched ahead of us, wide and quiet. I rested one hand against his back again, relaxed but alert. All right, I said lightly. Let's see where we end up next. Chapter 3, Steel and Teeth. Max moved at a steady pace beneath me, his steps controlled as we kept alongside the road without fully stepping onto it. The trees stayed thick enough to hide his size, though not completely. Anyone looking too closely would notice something was wrong. So I didn't give anyone the chance. I leaned forward slightly, resting my forearm against the side of his neck. All right, I said casually, we're upgrading from random bandits to actual soldiers now. Max let out a low sound, calm and ready. Yeah, I know, I added with a small grin. Better gear. Better reactions. Still not enough. I slowed him with a light tap. Easy. He stopped. I slid down from his back and stepped closer to the edge of the trees again, lowering my stance just enough to stay hidden while still seeing clearly. Voices carried through first. Then armor. Red. Lannister. 6 of them. Not a full unit, just a scouting group like I expected. Light armor, swords, one of them with a spear, another carrying a short bow. Their formation was loose but not careless. They were talking, but their eyes were moving. Heard Stannis broke through the gate for a moment, one said, adjusting his grip on his sword. Didn't matter, another replied. Lord Tywin came in behind them. Battle's done. Still fighting in parts of the city. Not for long. I watched them walk. Measured distance. Spacing. Awareness. Better than the bandits. Not by much. I stepped back slowly and returned to Max. He was already watching me. 6, I said quietly. Lannister scouts. Decent gear. Not amazing. Max's head lowered slightly. I placed my hand on his snout. We're doing this clean. His breathing stayed even. No roaring, no playing around, I added. In and out. His tail shifted once. I smiled a little. Good. I climbed onto his back again, settling in with practiced movement now. All right, I said lightly, let's go introduce ourselves. Max moved forward the moment I tapped his side. We didn't rush immediately. We closed distance first. Quiet. Controlled. The soldiers were still walking, unaware. Then. Now. Max surged forward. Fast. Not subtle anymore. Branches snapped as he pushed through the last line of trees and hit the road. The first soldier turned, eyes widening. What in the... Max was already on him. One clean hit. The man dropped hard, armor cracking under the force. The others reacted immediately. Form up, one of them shouted, stepping back, sword up. Better than the bandits. They didn't freeze. They adjusted. Two moved to the sides, one raising the bow, another bracing the spear. I leaned lower against Max's back. Left first. He shifted instantly, turning into the nearest target before the formation could settle. The archer loosed an arrow. It hit Max's side. He didn't slow. Didn't react beyond a slight twitch. Yeah, I said with a small grin, that's not gonna work. Max reached the leftmost soldier and knocked him aside before he could fully raise his weapon. 3 left in front. The spear came forward next. I tapped Max's neck. Break it. He angled slightly, letting the spear glance off instead of taking it directly, then closed the distance in one step. Too close. The soldier lost his advantage immediately. Max hit him hard, sending him back into the dirt. Behind, I said quickly. Max turned as the remaining 2 tried to reposition. One of them hesitated. Just for a second. That was enough. Max moved through him cleanly. The last one dropped his sword. 7 hells, what is that? He started, backing up. I straightened slightly on Max's back. Yeah, I get that a lot, I said casually. The man turned to run. I tapped Max once. Don't let him. Max closed the distance in seconds. It ended there. Quiet again. I exhaled lightly and slid off his back. All right, I said, brushing my hands together once. That was smoother. Max stood still, looking at me. I walked over to the bodies, crouching slightly to check their gear. Let's see what we got. Lannister armor. Usable. Not perfect fit, but close enough. Coin pouch. Food. Water skin. I nodded once. Yeah, this works. Behind me. Ding. I paused. Then I smiled slightly. About time, I said. A panel appeared in front of me. Hidden mission completed, use a dinosaur in battle. Reward, spin available. I stood up straight again. Max watched me. Okay, I said, rolling my shoulder once. Let's see what we get. I focused. Spin. The panel shifted. A wheel appeared, sections moving quickly, names flashing past too fast to read clearly. I crossed my arms, watching it slow. Come on, I said lightly. Something useful. It clicked. Stopped. Reward, 2 Utahraptors. I blinked once. All right, I said after a second. Not the best. Max tilted his head. I shrugged slightly. Not the worst either. The air shifted behind me. I turned. 2 smaller figures stood a short distance away. Utahraptors. Lean. Fast-looking. Alert. They watched me closely. I looked between them, then glanced at Max. "All right," I said, a little amused. "We've got a team now." The raptors stepped closer cautiously. Max stayed still, observing them. No aggression. Just awareness. I walked toward them slowly, hands relaxed at my sides. They didn't back away. Good. I reached one first, placing my hand gently against its head. It stayed still. "Yeah," I said softly, "you're all right." The second one circled slightly, then stopped near Max. Max lowered his head slightly, acknowledging it. I smiled a little. "Okay, this works." I turned back toward the bodies. "Let's gear up." I pulled one of the Lannister soldiers aside and started removing the armor piece by piece. It took a bit of adjustment, but I got it on. Not perfect, but convincing enough at a distance. I picked up the sword next, testing the weight. "Decent," I said. Max watched as I worked. The raptors stayed close now, calmer. I grabbed the coin pouch and tied it at my side, then picked up the remaining supplies. "Food's yours," I said, tossing a portion toward the raptors. They reacted instantly, moving in without hesitation. Max didn't move. I looked at him. "You get first pick later." He huffed softly. I smirked. "Yeah, I know you don't need it right now." I adjusted the armor slightly, then stepped back, looking down at myself. "Not bad," I said. I turned toward the road. "Now we can actually move around without everyone panicking." I glanced back at Max. "Well," I added, "most people." He made a low sound. I walked over and placed a hand against his side. "You stay off the road," I said. "Same as before." Then I looked at the raptors. "You two stick close to him." They watched me, still and attentive. "Good," I said. I turned back toward the road and stepped out this time, not hiding. Armor changed everything. Posture changed with it. I walked like I belonged there. Not rushed. Not cautious. Just steady. Behind me, I could hear Max moving through the trees, keeping pace at a distance. The raptors stayed with him. I kept my eyes forward. King's Landing was still far. But now, I could move. I adjusted the sword at my side slightly and let out a small breath. "All right," I said quietly, a faint grin on my face. "Now we're getting somewhere." Chapter 4, Fire and a Hound. The road stretched ahead, dry and uneven, marked with deep wagon tracks and scattered footprints. The air carried a faint smell of smoke. Not fresh, but recent enough. I walked right down the center of it. Armor on. Sword at my side. Posture relaxed. Behind me, nothing was hidden. Max moved through the open now, no trees covering him. His steps were steady, heavy, controlled. The two Utahraptors stayed close to him, flanking without being told, their heads shifting as they watched everything around them. Anyone who saw us would stop. That was the point. I rolled my shoulders slightly and adjusted the strap of the armor. "Let's see how people react," I said casually. Max huffed. "Yeah, I know," I added with a small grin. "Subtle isn't really our thing anymore." We kept moving. It didn't take long. Up ahead, a lone figure walked along the side of the road, moving away from the direction of King's Landing. Tall. Heavy built. Armor worn without care. Sword at his side. Even from a distance, I recognized him. Sandor Clegane. The Hound. His pace was steady but not rushed. No horse. No escort. Just walking. Matches exactly. I let out a quiet breath. Perfect timing. Max's steps slowed slightly as we approached. Sander stopped walking before we even got close enough to speak. He didn't turn immediately. He just stood there. Then, slowly, he looked over his shoulder. His eyes landed on Max first. Then the raptors. Then me. He didn't move. Didn't step back. Didn't reach for his weapon. He just stared. "What the hell is that?" he said flatly. I kept walking until I was a comfortable distance away, then stopped. Max stopped behind me. The raptors shifted slightly, low and alert. I rested a hand casually on the hilt of my sword, not drawing it. "Dog," I said simply. Sander's gaze didn't leave Max. "That's not a dog." I shrugged slightly. "Big dog." He looked at me now. "Longer." "Measuring." "You a Lannister man?" he asked, his tone rough, uninterested. I glanced down at the armor briefly, then back at him. "Wearing the colors," I said lightly. "Doesn't mean I like the management." His expression didn't change. He looked back at Max again. "That thing yours?" "Yeah," I said. One of the raptors stepped forward slightly, letting out a low sound. Sander's eyes shifted to it. "And those?" "Also mine." He went quiet again. I could see it in the way he stood. No fear. No panic. Just calculation. Then he spat to the side. "Not my problem," he said bluntly. He turned slightly, like he was about to keep walking. I tilted my head a bit. "You just walked away from a war," I said casually. He stopped again. Slow. Deliberate. His back still facing me. "Cities burning," I continued, my tone easy. "People screaming. Fire everywhere." He didn't respond. I watched him. "I get it," I added. "Not your thing." His shoulders tensed slightly. He turned back again, eyes narrowing. "You don't know anything," he said, his voice low. I shrugged. "I know you left." He stared at me. For a second, there was something sharper in his expression. Then it flattened again. "I'm done with it," he said. "Kings. Knights. All of it." I nodded once. "Fair." I took a few steps closer, slow and casual. Max stayed where he was. The raptors didn't move. "You heading somewhere?" I asked, "or just walking until you feel better?" He gave a short, humorless sound. "Walking." "Solid plan," I said. He looked at me again. "You always talk this much?" he asked. "Only when it's interesting," I replied with a small grin. His eyes flicked back to Max. "That thing eats people." "Sometimes," I said honestly. He grunted. "Good." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "That's your takeaway?" He shrugged one shoulder. "World's full of worse things." I smiled faintly at that. "Yeah. That tracks." I shifted my stance slightly, letting the armor settle more comfortably. "You going north?" I asked. "Maybe. South? Maybe." I exhaled lightly. "You're really committed to not having a plan?" He didn't respond. I glanced back at Max, then at the raptors, then back to Sander. "Well," I said, "I've got a direction." He waited. "Not the city," I added. His jaw shifted slightly. "Good." I took another step closer, closing the distance just enough to feel like a conversation instead of a standoff. "I've got food," I said. "Got muscle." I gestured lightly behind me. Max shifted his weight slightly, the ground pressing under him. The raptors stayed still. Sander looked at them again. Then back at me. "You're not right," he said. I smiled. "I've been told worse." He studied me for another few seconds. Then he looked down the road again. Quiet. I didn't rush him. Didn't push. Just waited. After a moment, he let out a breath through his nose. "I'm not taking orders," he said. "Good," I replied immediately. "I don't like giving them." His eyes flicked back to me. "You get in my way," he said, "I'll kill you." I nodded once. "Fair." He jerked his chin slightly toward Max. "That thing tries anything." "It won't," I said calmly. Max let out a low, steady sound behind me. Sander glanced at him again. Then at the raptors. Then back at me. "Fine," he muttered. He turned fully this time, facing the direction he'd been walking before. Didn't say anything else. Just started moving. I watched him for a second, then turned slightly. "All right," I said, clapping my hands once lightly. "We've got a travel buddy." Max stepped forward immediately. The raptors followed. I fell into step beside Sander, matching his pace easily. For a while, we walked in silence. The road stretched ahead. The smoke in the air got lighter the further we moved away from the city. Sander didn't look at me. Didn't look at the dinosaurs. He just walked. After a bit, I broke the silence. "You left because of the fire," I said casually. He didn't respond immediately. "Then, I left because I felt like it." I nodded slightly. "Yet." I glanced at him. His jaw was tight. His grip on his sword wasn't relaxed. I didn't push further. No need. We kept walking. The raptors moved quietly now, adjusting to the pace. Max stayed just behind us, his presence obvious with every step. After a few more minutes, Sander spoke again. "Those things got names?" he asked. I smiled a little. "Big ones, Max," I said. He glanced back at him briefly. "Max," he repeated flatly. "Yet." He looked at the raptors. "And them?" I looked at them, then shrugged slightly. "Haven't decided yet." One of them tilted its head slightly. I pointed at it. "Don't rush me." Sander gave a short grunt. We kept moving. "Where'd you even get them?" he asked after a while. I stretched my neck slightly, thinking for half a second. "Found them," I said. He looked at me. Didn't believe it. Didn't argue either. "Right," he said. I smiled. We walked like that for a while longer. No tension. No rush. Just movement. Then, in the distance, a small group came into view. Civilians. 3 of them. Walking slowly, carrying what they could. They hadn't noticed us yet. I saw Sander's eyes shift slightly. He noticed them too. I glanced at him. He didn't change direction. Didn't speed up. Didn't slow down. Just kept walking. I looked forward again. "Relax," I said lightly. "We're not robbing them." He didn't respond. As we got closer, the civilians finally noticed us. Then they noticed Max. They froze. One of them dropped what he was holding. Another took a step back. The third just stared. "7 save us," one of them whispered. I raised a hand casually. "You're fine," I said calmly. They didn't move. Max stayed still. The raptors didn't advance. I walked past them like it was normal. Sander did the same. None of us stopped. Once we were past them, I let out a small breath. "See," I said casually, "not so bad." Sander glanced back briefly, then forward again. "They'll talk," he said. "Good," I replied. "Saves us introductions." He gave a quiet grunt. We kept walking. The road stretched on. The day moved forward slowly. No rush. No pressure. Just steps. And company. Chapter 5, Taking What Moves. We kept walking. The road stayed quiet for a while after we passed those civilians. No carts. No riders. Just open dirt and the occasional wind pushing dust along the ground. Sander walked like nothing around him mattered. Same pace. Same posture. His hand rested near his sword without gripping it. He didn't look at Max anymore. Didn't look at the raptors either. He had already accepted they were there. That was enough for him. I walked beside him, hands relaxed, armor settling naturally with each step. Max stayed a few paces behind us, his presence constant. The raptors moved in loose patterns around him, sometimes drifting closer to me, then back again. After a while, I spoke. "There's a convoy coming," I said casually. Sander didn't look at me. "You hear it?" "Not yet," I replied. He gave me a side glance. "Then how do you know?" I smiled a little. "Because it's the kind of road where supply lines run after a battle like that. Lannisters will be moving food, weapons, probably wounded too." He grunted. "And you want it?" "Yeah," I said simply. He looked forward again. "Then wait." I nodded once. "Exactly." We kept walking until the road curved slightly and opened into a wider stretch. Fewer trees. Better visibility. I slowed down and raised a hand. Max stopped immediately. The raptors paused as well. Sander stopped a second later, more out of awareness than instruction. "What?" he said. I tilted my head slightly, listening. "Now." "Faint. Wheels. Metal. Voices." "There," I said. Sander's eyes shifted forward, narrowing slightly. He heard it now too. I stepped off the road and motioned toward a cluster of trees nearby. "Set up here." He didn't argue. We moved into position quickly. Max stayed partially behind the trees, though there was no real hiding him. The raptors lowered themselves slightly, bodies tense and ready. I looked at Sander. "Simple," I said. "They stop, we take it." "They don't stop," he replied flatly. "They will." He looked at Max. "Right." I leaned casually against a tree for a moment, waiting. The sounds got louder. Then the convoy came into view. 2 wagons. 8 soldiers. 1 riding ahead. Lannister colors. Standard formation. Nothing special. I pushed off the tree and stepped back onto the road. Sander followed without hesitation. We stood there, right in the middle. The lead rider slowed immediately. "What's this?" he called out. His eyes moved from me to Sander. Then past us. To Max. Everything stopped. The horses reacted first, shifting nervously. The soldiers tightened formation. "What in the 7 hells is that?" one of them said. I raised a hand slightly. "Relax," I said calmly. No one relaxed. "Good." I tilted my head slightly. "You're carrying supplies," I continued. "We're taking them." The lead rider stared at me like I was insane. Then he laughed once, short and sharp. You and him, he said, nodding toward Sander. I shrugged. Mostly him, I said, then gestured back casually. And them. Max stepped forward. Slow. Heavy. The ground pressed under his weight. The raptors followed, spreading slightly. The laughter stopped. The soldiers tightened up immediately. Hold, one of them shouted. Too late. I glanced at Sander. Try not to kill the horses, I said lightly. He drew his sword without a word. That was enough. I tapped my leg once. Go. Max moved first. Fast. Straight into the center. The formation broke immediately. One soldier tried to hold position. Max hit him head-on. He went down hard. The others scattered. The raptors moved next. Quick. Controlled. They went for the edges, cutting off movement instead of charging straight in. Left, I said, stepping forward. Sander was already moving. He met one of the soldiers head-on, blocking a strike and cutting him down cleanly. No wasted movement. No hesitation. Another soldier came at me. I drew my sword and stepped in. He swung too wide. I adjusted slightly and struck once. He dropped. I exhaled lightly. All right, I said under my breath. Behind me, I heard one of the wagons shift as a horse tried to pull away. Max, I said. He turned immediately, moving toward the wagon and blocking its path. The horse stopped, panicking but unable to move forward. Good, I added. One of the soldiers tried to run. A raptor intercepted him, fast enough that he didn't even get a full step away. Sander moved through the remaining two like they weren't there. Efficient. Direct. Within moments. It was over. I lowered my sword slightly and looked around. No one left standing. The wagons were intact. The horses were alive. I nodded once. Clean. Sander wiped his blade against one of the fallen soldiers and sheathed it without ceremony. He looked at Max, then at the raptors. Useful, he said. I smiled slightly. I try. I walked over to the first wagon and pulled back the cover. Food. Grain. Salted meat. I gave a small approving nod. Yeah, this works. The second wagon had weapons. Spears, swords, shields. I glanced back at Sander. Upgrading your wardrobe. He shook his head. Don't need it. Fair. I grabbed a piece of dried meat and tossed it toward one of the raptors. It caught it immediately. The second one moved closer, waiting. Yeah, I said, tossing another piece. Max stepped closer, lowering his head slightly. I looked up at him. You're getting more than that. He huffed. I reached into the wagon and pulled out a larger portion, holding it up. Catch. He took it easily. I leaned against the wagon for a second, taking a small breath. Then. Ding. I smiled immediately. There it is, I said quietly. Sander looked at me. What? Nothing, I replied casually. Just a good day. A panel appeared briefly in front of me. Mission completed, successfully raid a supply convoy. Reward, spin available. I rolled my neck slightly. We're on a streak. Sander frowned slightly. You talking to yourself? Sometimes, I said. Helps me think. He grunted. I focused again. Spin. The wheel appeared, moving quickly. I watched it slow. Let's see. It clicked. Stopped. I looked at the result. All right, I said quietly. Not bad. I glanced at Max, then at the raptors. Team's growing, I added under my breath. Sander was already walking toward the wagon again, uninterested in whatever I was doing. I stepped away from the panel as it faded. All right, I said, clapping my hands once lightly. We take what we can carry, leave the rest. Sander grabbed a waterskin and a small sack without asking. I loaded up quickly, securing food and coin. The raptors stayed close, calm now. Max stood near the wagon, watching everything. Once we were done, I stepped back onto the road. Next stop, I said, thinking for a second. Sander looked at me. There's an inn up ahead, I continued. Good place to stop. He narrowed his eyes slightly. You been here before? I smiled faintly. Something like that. He didn't push. Fine, he said. I started walking again. Max followed. The raptors fell into place. Sander walked beside me after a moment. The road stretched forward. More traveled now. More signs of movement. We passed a broken cart. A burned patch of ground. War was everywhere out here. After a while, I spoke again. Place we're heading, I said casually, you might see some familiar faces. Sander didn't react much. Don't care. Yeah, I said with a small grin. You will. He glanced at me briefly. Then looked forward again. We kept walking. The sun shifted slightly overhead. Time passed slow. Steady. Then. In the distance. A structure. Low. Wooden. An inn. I let out a small breath. There it is. Sander's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at it. People moved around outside. Not many. But enough. I rolled my shoulders once. All right, I said quietly. Let's not break it immediately. Max let out a low sound behind me. I smirked. No promises though. Chapter 6, Horns at the Door. The inn sat just ahead, close enough now that I could see the details clearly. Wooden structure. 2 levels. A few people moving outside. Horses tied off to the side. Nothing unusual at a glance. I slowed my steps slightly. Sander didn't. He kept walking, then noticed I wasn't matching him and stopped after a few more steps. He turned his head toward me, eyes narrowing a little. What now? He said flatly. I raised a hand casually. Give me a minute. He stared at me. A minute, he repeated. Yeah, I said lightly. Try not to miss me too much. His expression didn't change. If you don't come back, I won't. I smiled. That's fair. I turned slightly and motioned toward Max and the raptors. Stay, I said. Max stopped immediately. The raptors froze in place, watching me. Don't move, I added, tapping Max's side once for emphasis. He huffed softly. Good, I said. I stepped off the road and walked back toward the tree line, not rushing, not sneaking. Just moving like I had something to do. I could feel Sander's eyes on my back for a few seconds before he looked away. Once I was far enough, I stopped. Quiet. No one nearby. I exhaled lightly and rolled my shoulders once. All right, I said under my breath. The panel appeared again without delay. Reward acquired, Triceratops. I glanced at it briefly and nodded. Yeah, I said quietly. That's solid. There was a shift in the air behind me. Heavy. I turned. The Triceratops stood there, large and grounded, its weight pressing into the dirt. 3 horns, thick body, steady stance. It didn't move aggressively. Just stood, breathing slow. I walked toward it without hesitation. "Hey," I said, placing a hand against the side of its head. It didn't react beyond a slight shift. "All right," I added, nodding once. "You're with me now." It blinked slowly. I stepped back and looked it over quickly. Big. Durable. Not fast like the raptors. Not overwhelming like Max. But useful. Very useful. I rubbed the back of my neck slightly. "Yeah, I'll take it." I turned back toward the road. "Let's go." The Triceratops followed immediately. Each step was heavy but controlled. It didn't rush. Didn't hesitate. Good temperament. As we got closer to the road again, Max lifted his head first. He saw it. The raptors reacted next, their bodies tensing slightly before settling again. I stepped back onto the road like nothing unusual had happened. Sander looked at me. Then past me. His eyes landed on the Triceratops. He went completely still. "You left," he said slowly, and came back with another one. I shrugged. "Found it." He stared at me. Long. Then he looked at Max. Then the raptors. Then back at the Triceratops. "You just find these things," he said. "Yeah," I replied easily. "Good area for it." He let out a quiet breath through his nose. "Right." I smiled faintly. "You're handling this surprisingly well." He shook his head slightly. "I've seen worse." I tilted my head. "Have you?" He didn't answer. I gestured forward with my chin. "Come on. In's waiting." He looked at the Triceratops one more time, then turned and started walking again. I fell into step beside him. Max followed. The raptors moved between them. The Triceratops brought up the rear. No one hid. No one slowed. We walked straight toward the inn. The first person to notice us was a stable boy. He looked up casually. Then froze. His mouth opened slightly. No sound came out. I raised a hand toward him. "Relax," I said calmly. He didn't relax. He just stood there, staring. A man near the door turned next. Then another. The reaction spread quickly. Fear. Confusion. No one moved toward us. No one ran either. They just watched. I kept walking. Sander didn't react at all. Same pace. Same posture. "Nice place," I said lightly, glancing around. "Bit tense though." "Noisy," he muttered. We reached the front. The door was open. I stepped inside first. The room wasn't crowded. A few tables. A few people. And I saw them immediately. Area. Short hair. Dirt on her face. Sitting at a table with Gendry and hot pie. Yoren wasn't there anymore. That already happened. Right timing. Good. I felt a small shift in my chest. Not emotion I needed to act on. Just recognition. Arya looked up first. Her eyes moved from me to Sander. Then past us. Her body tensed. Gendry followed her gaze. Hot pie froze completely. "What is that?" Hot pie said quietly. I stepped further inside. "Those," I said casually, glancing back. "Pets." Sander walked in behind me, his presence immediately shifting the room even more. Someone near the back stood up quickly. I'm not staying for this, he muttered, moving toward the exit. I ignored him. I walked toward Arya's table without asking. Sander followed, stopping just off to the side. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from them. Hey, I said simply. Arya stared at me. Her eyes were sharp. Suspicious. What are you? She said. I smiled slightly. Not the friendliest greeting. Gendry leaned forward slightly, his eyes still flicking toward the door. You with the Lannisters. I glanced down at the armor briefly. Wearing the colors, I said. Doesn't mean much. Arya didn't relax. Her gaze moved to Sander. Her expression tightened immediately. You, she said. Sander looked at her, recognizing her just as quickly. Stark girl, he said. She didn't respond to that. Her attention shifted between both of us now. I rested my arm on the table casually. Relax, I said. If we wanted trouble, we wouldn't be sitting. Hot Pie shook his head slightly. You brought monsters, he said nervously. They're outside, I replied. Mostly. Gendry frowned. Mostly. I smiled a little. Don't worry about it. Arya leaned forward slightly, her voice low. Why are you here? I met her eyes. Food, I said simply. Information. She watched me closely. Trying to figure me out. Good luck with that. Sander shifted his weight slightly beside me. They're nobody, he said bluntly. Eat and go. Arya's jaw tightened. I'm not nobody, she said. He gave a short, humorless sound. You're a little girl. Her hand moved slightly under the table. I noticed. So did he. Careful, he said, his tone flat. I raised a hand slightly. All right, let's not do this right now. They both glanced at me. I smiled faintly. We're all having a day. Gendry exhaled slowly. You don't seem worried, he said. I shrugged. I'm not. Hot Pie looked toward the door again. Those things are still out there. Yeah, I said. They're not coming in unless I say so. Arya's eyes narrowed. They listen to you. Most of the time, I replied. Sander glanced at me. Most. I gave a small grin. We're working on it. A woman behind the counter hesitated, then approached slowly. You want food? She asked carefully. I looked at her and nodded. Yeah, I said calmly. Whatever's ready. She nodded quickly and stepped away. I leaned back slightly in my chair. See, I said, looking at Arya, normal interaction. She didn't respond. She kept watching me. Then she glanced at Sander again. You left the battle, she said. He didn't deny it. Yet. Ran. He stared at her. Then, I walked. I watched them both, quiet for a moment. Then I tapped the table lightly. So, I said, shifting the focus, where are you three heading? Gendry hesitated. Arya answered first. North. I nodded once. Good direction. Sander looked at me briefly. I ignored it. The food arrived a moment later. Simple. Bread. Stew. I pulled the bowl closer and started eating without hesitation. Sander grabbed his portion just as quickly. Arya didn't touch hers yet. She was still watching. Always watching. I took another bite, then glanced up at her. You should eat, I said. You'll need it. She didn't answer immediately. Then she picked up the spoon. Slow. Still cautious. Good. Chapter 7, One Road North. I finished another bite before speaking. No rush. No pressure. Just enough time for the room to settle again after we walked in. Arya still hadn't taken her eyes off me for long. Gendry was more subtle about it, but I could see it in the way he held himself. Ready. Watching. Hot Pie just looked like he wanted to disappear into the bench. Sander ate like none of it mattered. I wiped my hand lightly against the edge of the table and leaned back a little. All right, I said casually. Let's simplify things. No one responded. Good. I looked directly at Arya. You said north, I said. So are we. She didn't answer immediately. Her expression didn't change much, but I saw the small shift in her eyes. She was thinking through it already. Gendry spoke first. We don't need help, he said carefully. I nodded once. Sure, I replied. You don't. I gestured vaguely toward the door with my thumb. 3 of you, I continued, on foot, in the middle of a war zone. No supplies worth mentioning. No protection. Hot Pie swallowed hard. Arya didn't look away from me. We've been fine. I gave a small smile. Yet. So far. Sander let out a quiet grunt beside me but didn't look up from his food. I leaned forward slightly, resting my forearm on the table. I'm heading north anyway, I said. You come with us, you don't have to worry about anyone bothering you. Gendry frowned. No one's bothering us now. I raised an eyebrow slightly. You sure about that? He didn't answer. I let that sit for a second. Arya finally spoke again. Why? I tilted my head a little. Why what? Why would you help us? She said, her tone flat. I shrugged. Because it's convenient. She didn't like that answer. Good. I added, same direction. Same road. Less effort. Sander finally looked up. You don't do anything for free, he said. I glanced at him. I'm not charging them. He stared at me for a second, then looked back down at his food. Arya leaned forward slightly. And what do you want? I met her gaze. Nothing, I said simply. She held that look for a moment longer, trying to pick it apart. Then she glanced toward the door. Toward Max. Even from inside, you could feel his presence out there. Gendry shifted in his seat. Those things, he said. They follow you. Yet. They listen. Most of the time, I said with a small grin. Hot Pie shook his head slightly. That's not normal. Neither is anything out here right now, I replied. Arya's jaw tightened slightly. She didn't like not having control of the situation. I tapped the table lightly once. Look, I said, keeping my tone easy. You don't trust me. That's fine. She didn't deny it. I don't need you to, I continued. You just need to decide if walking alone is better than walking with us. Gendry glanced at Arya. Hot Pie did the same. Sander stayed out of it. I leaned back again, giving them space to think. Arya looked down at the table briefly. Then back up at me. You'll slow us down, she said. I smiled faintly. I won't. Gendry gave a small, doubtful look. You've got a giant, whatever that is. Max, I said. He blinked. Max. Yet. That doesn't exactly move quietly. I shrugged. It doesn't need to. Sander let out a low sound that might have been agreement. Arya's eyes shifted between all of us again. Then she stood up. Slow. Decisive. "We're not staying here," she said. I nodded once. "Good plan." Gendry stood next. Hot Pie followed, a little slower. Sander didn't move yet. I stood up as well, adjusting my armor slightly. Arya looked at me. "We go north," she said. "You don't get in the way." I smiled. "I won't." She narrowed her eyes slightly. "And if you do? You'll stab me," I finished casually. "Yeah, I got that already." Her expression didn't change, but she didn't argue. Sander stood up then, grabbing the last piece of bread without asking. "You're all idiots," he said flatly. I glanced at him. "And yet, here we are." He walked toward the door. I followed. Arya and the others came after us. The moment we stepped outside, all attention snapped back to Max. And now? The Triceratops. And the raptors. Everything stopped again. A man near the stables backed away immediately. Another just stood there, staring. Hot Pie froze halfway out the door. "They're still here," he said quietly. "Yeah," I replied. "They didn't leave." Gendry stepped out more cautiously, his eyes locked on Max. Arya followed last. She didn't step back. Didn't flinch. But I could see the tension in her shoulders. Good control. I walked forward toward Max and placed a hand against his side. "You behaved?" I asked lightly. He huffed. "Nice." I glanced back at the others. "They won't hurt you," I said. Hot Pie shook his head. "That's not comforting." Gendry stepped a little closer, still cautious. Arya moved next. Slow. Measured. She stopped a few steps away from Max. Her eyes moved over him carefully. "He's big," she said. "Yeah," I replied. One of the raptors stepped slightly toward her. She reacted instantly, shifting her stance. I raised a hand. "Easy." The raptor stopped. Arya noticed that. Her eyes flicked back to me. "They listen," she said again. "Yeah." Sander walked past all of us, uninterested. "We leaving or not?" he said. I smirked slightly. "Always in a rush." I looked back at Arya. "Ready?" She hesitated for half a second. Then nodded once. Gendry followed her lead. Hot Pie sighed but didn't argue. "All right," I said, clapping my hands once lightly. "Group's bigger now." Sander muttered something under his breath. I started walking. Max moved beside me. The raptors adjusted their positions, keeping a loose circle. The Triceratops followed behind. Arya and her group stayed close, but not too close. Sander walked slightly ahead, like he didn't care if we followed or not. We moved back onto the road. North. After a few minutes, Gendry spoke. "How do you control them?" he asked. I glanced at him. "Practice." He frowned slightly. "That's it." "Pretty much." Arya looked at me. "They don't attack you?" "No." "Why?" I shrugged. "They like me." She didn't look convinced. That was fine. Hot Pie stayed quiet, walking carefully and keeping distance from the raptors. One of them moved closer to him briefly. He flinched. "Hey," I said lightly. The raptor stopped and backed off slightly. Hot Pie let out a breath. "I don't like that." "They're friendly," I said. "They don't look friendly." "That's just the face." Sander let out a short grunt ahead of us. I smiled faintly. We kept walking. The road stretched out, quieter now. More open. Less traffic. After a while, Arya moved up beside me. Not too close. But close enough. You said it's safer with you, she said. Yet. She looked forward. Why? I glanced at her briefly, then ahead again. Because anyone who sees us, I said, thinks twice. She considered that. Then nodded slightly. That was enough for her. For now. I adjusted my pace slightly to match the group better. No one rushed. No one lagged. Just steady movement. North. Chapter 8, A Name Without Land. We didn't slow down. Not after leaving the inn. Not after the road cleared. Not even when the land started to change. The riverlands stretched ahead, marked by damage that hadn't had time to settle. Burned patches. Broken carts. The occasional body left where it fell. Arya stopped looking at everything after a while. Gendry kept looking. Hot Pie tried not to. Sander ignored all of it. I walked at the front now. Max stayed just behind me, close enough that I could reach him without turning. The raptors moved along the sides, adjusting constantly. The Triceratops followed with steady steps, slower but consistent. The group had adjusted. Not comfortable. But functional. That was enough. I kept my eyes forward. Rob's camp wasn't hidden in any real sense. Not to me. I knew where it would be positioned based on movement, terrain, and what came next. More importantly, timing. We were close. I rolled my shoulders slightly and let out a quiet breath. Almost there, I said. Arya looked at me. Where? Camp, I replied. Whose? I glanced at her. Yours. Her expression tightened slightly. She didn't ask again. Good. We kept moving for another stretch of time before the first signs appeared. Scouts. Not visible at first. But I knew. And then. One stepped out. Northern armor. Bow ready. Stop there, he called out. We stopped. Max stopped. The raptors stilled. The Triceratops shifted its weight once. The man's eyes widened slightly at that. What in the... Relax, I said calmly, raising a hand. More movement in the trees. 3 more. Weapons drawn. Focused on Max first. Then everything else. Then us. State your business, the first one said, trying to hold his ground. I stepped forward slightly. I'm here to see Robb Stark, I said. That got a reaction. Not big. But enough. You don't just walk in to see the king in the north, one of them said. I smiled faintly. I figured. Their eyes kept moving between me and the dinosaurs. Then why are you here? The first one asked. I tilted my head slightly. To help. They didn't believe that. Fair. One of them looked at Arya. His eyes widened. Girl, he said, stepping forward slightly. Is that? Arya stepped forward before he could finish. I need to see my brother, she said firmly. That shifted everything. The men looked at each other. Then back at her. Recognition hit. 7 hells, one of them muttered. The first man lowered his bow slightly. Get them to the camp, he said. His eyes flicked back to Max. And keep those things under control. I gave a small nod. Always do. We started moving again. Now with an escort. The tension didn't drop. If anything, it sharpened. Word spread ahead of us. I could tell by the way people reacted before they even saw us. By the time we reached the outer edges of the camp, everyone knew something was coming. And then they saw it. Max stepped into full view first. The reaction was immediate. Men stopped what they were doing. Some stood. Some reached for weapons. None of them approached. The raptors followed. Then the Triceratops. The space around us cleared without anyone saying a word. I walked forward like it was normal. Sander stayed beside me. Arya moved ahead slightly now, her pace faster. She wasn't looking at anything else anymore. Just forward. We were stopped again near the center. More guards. Better armor. Hold, one of them said. Then he saw Arya. Everything changed again. Get the king, he said immediately. No hesitation. Good. I crossed my arms loosely and waited. Max stood still behind me. The raptors lowered slightly, calm but ready. The Triceratops stayed grounded. Sander shifted his weight slightly. This'll be fun, he muttered. I smiled a little. Try to behave. He didn't respond. It didn't take long. Robb Stark stepped into view. Young. Focused. Surrounded by men who knew war. Greywind at his side. The moment Greywind saw Max, he froze. Low growl. Deep. Max didn't react. Just watched. Robb's eyes moved from Arya. Relief hit immediately. Then to me. Then past me. To everything else. What is this? He said. Arya ran forward. Robb. His attention snapped back to her instantly. Arya, he said, stepping forward. He pulled her in without hesitation. Tight. Real. I watched quietly. No interruption. No comment. After a moment, he pulled back, hands on her shoulders. You're alive, he said, his voice steady but tight. I told you I would be, she replied. He nodded once, then looked at Gendry and Hot Pie. Then at me. His expression hardened slightly. Who are you? He asked. I stepped forward, relaxed. My name's not important, I said. That got a reaction from the men around him. Robb didn't like it either. Everything here is important, he said. I smiled faintly. Fair. I gestured slightly behind me. I'm the leader of a kingdom, I said. Silence. Then. What kingdom? One of his bannermen asked. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on Robb. New one, I said. His gaze didn't shift. You come into my camp, he said, with those things, and expect me to believe that. I shrugged slightly. You don't have to believe it. Greywind growled again, louder this time. Max shifted slightly. I raised a hand without looking back. Easy, I said. Max stilled. Greywind didn't. Robb placed a hand on his direwolf's neck. Hold, he said quietly. Greywind obeyed. Barely. I nodded once. Good control. Robb didn't respond to that. What do you want? He asked. Straight to the point. I liked that. Alliance, I said. That stirred the men around him. You're in no position to ask for that, one of them said. I glanced at him briefly. Didn't ask you. He stepped forward slightly. Robb raised a hand. He stopped. Robb looked at me again. Why would I ally with you? He asked. I tilted my head slightly. Because I win fights, I said simply. A few of them scoffed at that. I didn't react. I just gestured behind me. Max stood there. The raptors shifted slightly. The Triceratops remained steady. Rob looked at them again. Longer this time. Measuring. You brought my sister here, he said. I did. And you want something for it? I shook my head. No. He didn't believe that. I smiled slightly. This is separate. He studied me for a moment. Then. What kind of kingdom? He asked. I paused. Just for a second. Then I answered. One that doesn't lose. That got a few reactions. Sander let out a quiet sound beside me. Rob didn't smile. He didn't get angry either. He just kept watching me. You don't have land, he said. Not yet, I replied. You don't have people. I glanced back slightly. Working on it. He followed my gaze briefly. Then looked back at me. And you expect me to trust you? I shrugged. No. That made him pause. I expect you to use me, I added. That landed. Different. Honest. He understood that. I saw it in his expression. I crossed my arms loosely again. You've got a war, I said. So do I. He frowned slightly. You just said you don't have land. Exactly, I said. That didn't make sense to most of them. But it didn't need to. Not yet. I felt it then. A faint shift. Ding. I didn't react outwardly. But I saw it. Kingdom quest initiated. 1. Form an alliance with a kingdom. 2. Spread your kingdom's name to 10% of the world. 3. Secure territory to establish your kingdom. I kept my face neutral. Good. Clear objectives. I focused back on Rob. You don't need to trust me, I said. You just need to point me at something you want gone. One of his men spoke up. And what happens when you decide we're next? I looked at him. You won't be, I said calmly. He didn't like that answer. Rob raised his hand again, silencing him. His eyes stayed on me. You'll fight for me, he said. I tilted my head slightly. I'll fight with you. A small difference. But it mattered. He caught it. I'm not one of your bannermen, I added. He nodded once, slowly. I wouldn't have you as one, he said. I smiled a little. Good. A brief silence settled. Then. He looked at Arya. Then back at me. You'll have your chance, he said. That was enough. I nodded once. That's all I need. Behind me, Max shifted slightly. The raptors moved. The Triceratops remained still. The camp stayed tense. But no one attacked. No one ran. They were watching. Learning. Chapter 9, A seat at the table. They didn't relax after that. Not the soldiers. Not the bannermen. Not even the ones pretending not to stare. Word spread fast. Faster than footsteps. By the time Rob turned and started toward the center of camp, everyone already knew something had changed. I followed him without waiting to be invited. Sander came with me. Not because he cared, just because he didn't have a reason not to. Max stayed where he was when I gave him a look. The raptors settled near him. The Triceratops lowered slightly, resting its weight. Stay, I said calmly. Max huffed once. Yeah, I know, I added with a small smile. Grey Wind didn't take his eyes off them. Arya stayed close to Rob now. Gendry and Hot Pie hovered just behind, unsure where to stand or what to do. We moved through the camp. Men stepped aside without being told. Some looked at me. Most looked past me. I kept walking like none of it mattered. Rob didn't speak until we reached the tent. Large. Guarded. Controlled. He stopped at the entrance and looked at me. "You'll speak when I ask you to," he said. I gave a small nod. "Sure." He studied me for half a second, like he expected pushback. "Didn't get it." He stepped inside. I followed. Sander followed me. Inside, the air was different. Quieter. Focused. A table sat in the center, covered in maps. Markers placed across it. Positions. Movements. Pressure points. Around it. Roose Bolton stood still, hands behind his back, eyes already on me the moment I entered. Great Jan Umber stood heavier, broader, his attention more direct, less subtle. Ricard Karstark stood with arms crossed, his expression hard. A few others I recognized. All of them looked at me. No one spoke at first. Rob stepped to the table. "He says he wants an alliance," he said plainly. That broke the silence. "With what?" Great Jan said immediately. "A traveling beast show." I smiled slightly. "That's one way to describe it." He looked at me, unimpressed. "You think this is a game?" "No," I said calmly. "I think you're losing time." That got his attention. Karstark's gaze sharpened slightly. Roose Bolton didn't react much. Just watched. Rob rested his hands on the table. "You said you could help," he said. "I can," I replied. Great Jan scoffed. "With what?" "One man and a few monsters." I glanced at him. "You saw them." "I saw animals." "Then you weren't paying attention," I said. That made him shift slightly. Not angry. Just more focused. Rob raised a hand slightly, keeping control of the room. "What do you offer?" he asked. I stepped closer to the table. I didn't touch it. Didn't need to. "Speed," I said. "Pressure. Results." Karstark frowned. "That's not an answer." I looked at him. "It is. You just don't like it." He didn't respond. Roose Bolton spoke then, his voice calm and measured. "You speak as though you understand war," he said. I glanced at him. "I do," I replied. He held my gaze for a moment. "Then you understand numbers," he said. "Supply. Position. Loyalty." I nodded slightly. "Yet." "And where do you fit into that?" he asked. I gestured vaguely behind me. "I don't," I said. That made a few of them exchange looks. I continued, "That's the point." Rob watched me closely. "Explain," he said. I leaned slightly, resting my hand on the edge of the table now. "You're fighting a standard war," I said. "Armies. Lines. Movements." He didn't interrupt. "You win some. You lose some. It drags out." Great Jan grunted. "That's war." "Yeah," I said. "It doesn't have to be." Karstark frowned. "You think you can end it quickly?" "I know I can shift it," I replied. Roose tilted his head slightly. "How?" I looked at him. "By not playing it the way you are," I said. Silence again. Rob's fingers tapped lightly against the table. "You'll need to be more specific," he said. I smiled faintly. "Fair." I pointed at the map. "Lannisters rely on structure," I said. Supply lines. Reinforcements. Communication. Ruse nodded slightly. As do we. Yeah, I said. Which is why it's slow. I tapped a point on the map. Break this, I said. You slow them. I tapped another. Hit this, I added. You delay them. I straightened slightly. I don't do that. Great Yan crossed his arms. Then what do you do? I looked at him. I remove things, I said simply. That sat differently. Rob's eyes narrowed slightly. Armies, he said. Sometimes, I replied. Ruse watched me carefully now. You're confident, he said. I'm right, I answered. Sander let out a quiet sound behind me. I ignored it. Rob exhaled slowly. You haven't proven anything, he said. I nodded once. True. Karstark stepped forward slightly. Then why are we even talking? I glanced at him. Because you're listening. He didn't like that. Rob raised his hand again, stopping him from pushing further. What do you want in return? Rob asked. I paused. Small. Then. Recognition, I said. That drew a reaction. Ruse's eyes sharpened slightly. Great Yan frowned. You want a title? I shook my head. No. Karstark narrowed his eyes. Then what? I met Rob's gaze. I want people to know I exist, I said. That was clearer. More direct. Rob studied me. You said you're a king, he said. I am. Of what? I smiled slightly. Working on that. Great Yan let out a short laugh. You're not a king without land. I shrugged. Give it time. Ruse spoke again. You seek legitimacy. I looked at him. Something like that. He nodded slowly. That can be arranged, he said. Rob glanced at him briefly, then back at me. You help us, Rob said, we acknowledge you. I tilted my head slightly. Publicly. He hesitated for half a second. Then nodded. Publicly, he confirmed. That was one. I felt the faint shift again in my awareness. No reaction on my face. Good. I rested my hand lightly on the table again. All right, I said. Now we're talking. Great Yan leaned forward slightly. And what exactly are you going to do? I looked at him. Whatever you point me at, I said. Karstark frowned. That's not a plan. It doesn't need to be, I replied. Rob straightened slightly. There's a Lannister hold nearby, he said. Fortified. Supplied. I already knew which one. I nodded. Yeah. He watched me. You'll take it. I smiled faintly. That's it. Great Yan scoffed. That's it, he says. I glanced at him. You want me to take two? He didn't answer. Sander shifted slightly behind me. You're going to get bored of this, he muttered. Not yet, I replied. Rob's gaze stayed steady. You succeed, he said, we move forward. I nodded once. Works for me. Ruse spoke quietly. And if you fail? I looked at him. I won't, I said. He held my gaze for a moment longer. Then gave a small nod. Conversation over. Decision made. Rob stepped back from the table. You move at first light, he said. I shook my head slightly. I move now. That got everyone's attention again. It's faster, I added. Great Yan looked like he wanted to argue. Rob didn't. He just nodded once. Then go, he said. I pushed off the table and turned. Sander followed immediately. As we reached the entrance, Rob spoke again. If you're lying, he said. I glanced back slightly. I'm not, I replied. Then I stepped out. The air outside felt different again. Word had spread even more. More eyes. More attention. Max lifted his head the moment I stepped out. The raptors shifted. The Triceratops remained steady. I walked toward them without slowing. Sander came up beside me. You talk too much, he said. I smiled slightly. You listen too much. He grunted. I placed a hand against Max's side. All right, I said lightly. We've got a job. He huffed. I glanced at the raptors. You two, try to keep up. They tilted their heads slightly. I looked back toward the tent briefly. Then forward again. Let's go make an impression, I said. Chapter 10, breaking the line. I didn't wait. The moment I stepped out of Rob's tent, I was already moving. No pause, no second thoughts. If anything, the air felt clearer now. Direction handled. Target decided. Max fell in beside me immediately. The raptors moved in tight arcs, alert. The Triceratops followed with steady, heavy steps. Sander walked on my left, his pace matching mine without effort. You're not even pretending to plan, he said. I glanced at him. I planned. You just weren't invited. He gave me a look that didn't change much. You're going to run straight at a fortified position. Yeah, I said. It's faster. That's not how forts work. I smiled slightly. We'll see. Behind us, movement picked up. Orders were already spreading. Rob didn't hesitate. That was good. I didn't look back, but I could hear it. Armor shifting. Men moving. Horses being readied. They're following, Sanders said. They should, I replied. We cleared the camp quickly. Once we were out far enough, I climbed onto Max's back in one smooth motion. All right, I said, settling in. Let's move. Max surged forward. Fast. The ground shook slightly under his weight, but he kept control. The raptors sprinted alongside him, keeping pace easily. The Triceratops didn't try to match the speed but stayed on course behind. Sander didn't mount anything. He just ran. And somehow kept up. I glanced down at him briefly. You ever think about riding one of these? No, he said flatly. Missed opportunity. We moved across open ground now, leaving the road behind. Faster this way. Direct. The fort wasn't far. I knew exactly where it would be positioned. Small. Reinforced. Used to control movement through the area. Enough men to hold. Not enough to survive this. I leaned forward slightly, resting a hand against Max's neck. Almost there, I said. He huffed. The raptors sped up slightly. Sander didn't respond. We crested a low rise. And there it was. Stone walls. Wooden reinforcements. Guards posted. Lannister banners. I slowed Max slightly. All right, I said calmly. There it is. Sander came to a stop beside us, breathing steady. That's not small, he said. No, I replied. But it's not enough. I looked it over carefully. Guards on the wall. Gate closed. Archers ready. They hadn't noticed us yet. Not fully. That would change. I glanced back briefly. In the distance, northern forces were moving. Not in formation yet. But coming. Good timing. I rolled my neck once. Okay, I said. We don't wait. Sander looked at me. Of course we don't. I pointed forward slightly. Max takes the gate, I said. Straight through. He huffed, ready. I glanced at the raptors. You two go wide, I added. Climb if you can. Distract. They shifted immediately, understanding enough. I looked back at the Triceratops. You, I said, pointing. Follow through once the gate breaks. Keep pressure. It blinked slowly. Good enough. Sander rested a hand on his sword. And me. I smiled slightly. Try to keep up. He drew his sword without another word. I leaned forward. All right, I said quietly. Let's go. Max moved. Fast. No stealth. No hesitation. Just straight at the gate. The guards saw us immediately. Shouting started. Horns. Get ready. What is that? Arrows fired. They hit. Max didn't slow. Didn't react. I kept my position steady, lowering slightly as we closed the distance. Keep going, I said. He did. The gate filled my vision. Then. Impact. Max hit it head on. Wood cracked instantly. The structure gave under the force. Not completely but enough. Again, I said. He pulled back and slammed into it a second time. This time. It broke. The gate burst inward. Splinters and debris scattered. We were through. Chaos started immediately. Soldiers rushed forward. Unorganized. Shouting over each other. Hold the line. Kill it. Max moved into them without slowing. One step. One swing. Men went down. I kept my balance easily. Left, I said. He turned slightly, clearing space. Behind us, the raptors were already inside. Fast. They moved along the edges, targeting isolated soldiers, breaking formation before it could form. Sander came in right after us. He didn't hesitate. Straight into the nearest group. Efficient. Brutal. No wasted movement. The Triceratops pushed through the broken gate next. Slower. But heavy. It forced the opening wider, knocking aside anyone too close. Good, I said. Arrows kept coming. Less accurate now. Too much movement. Too much confusion. I looked up briefly. Archers on the wall. Raptors, I said, pointing. They moved immediately. Climbing. Fast. The soldiers above didn't expect that. They barely had time to react before the raptors reached them. Screams. Movement broke further. I leaned forward again. Center, I said. Max pushed deeper into the fort. No resistance held. Not for more than a second. Every attempt at forming a line collapsed under pressure. Behind us. The northern forces arrived. I heard it. War horns. Shouts. They didn't stop at the gate. They poured in. Rob rode at the front. Grey wind ahead of him. The moment they saw the gate broken, everything accelerated. Push, someone shouted. They didn't need to. The work was already done. I guided Max through the center, clearing the main yard. Soldiers dropped weapons. Some tried to run. The raptors cut them off. The Triceratops held the gate, preventing escape. Sander moved through the remaining resistance like it didn't matter. I exhaled lightly. Yeah, I said under my breath. That works. Rob reached the center moments later. He pulled his horse to a stop, taking in the scene. The broken gate. The fallen soldiers. Max. The raptors. The Triceratops. Me. He didn't speak immediately. Good. Let him process it. Greywind stood tense beside him, but didn't move forward. Rob finally looked at me. That was fast, he said. I smiled slightly. Told you. Great Jan rode in behind him, looking around. What in the hell's he started, then stopped. He looked at Max. Then at me. Then back at the gate. Ruse arrived next, slower, more measured. His eyes moved across everything. Calculating. Always. You broke it, Rob said. Yeah, I replied. He nodded once. No exaggeration. No disbelief. Just acknowledgement. Good. Sander walked up beside me, wiping his blade. That was loud, he said. I glanced at him. You're welcome. He didn't respond. The northern soldiers secured the area quickly. What little resistance remained didn't last. I slid down from Max's back. Boots hitting the ground. I rolled my shoulder once. All right, I said casually. That's one. Rob dismounted. He walked toward me. Close enough to speak without raising his voice. You'll be recognized, he said. I nodded once. You said that already. He held my gaze. I'll keep my word. I smiled faintly. I know. He glanced at Max again. Then the others. You'll have more targets, he said. I tilted my head slightly. Good. He gave a small nod. Behind him, his men were already talking. Not quietly. Word spreading again. Faster this time. I could hear pieces of it. What are those things? They broke the gate. Never seen anything like it. I let out a small breath. Yeah, I said under my breath. That helps. Sander looked at me. You like attention? I shrugged slightly. Useful. He grunted. I walked a few steps forward, looking around the fort. Position secured. Supplies intact. Minimal damage. Efficient. I rested a hand briefly against Max's side. You did good, I said. He huffed. One of the raptors moved closer. I glanced at it. You too. The Triceratops stood near the gate, calm. I nodded once toward it. And you? Rob's voice carried from behind me. Send word, he said to one of his men. Let them know. I smiled slightly. There it was. I turned back toward him. Make sure you describe it properly, I said. He gave me a brief look. I will. I nodded once. Good. Chapter 11, Ground to Stand On. The fort settled fast once the fighting stopped. Northern soldiers moved through the yard, checking rooms, dragging bodies, securing stores, posting guards. The noise changed from battle to work. Less shouting. More orders. Boots on stone. Wood shifting. Armor moving. I stood near the broken gate with Max at my side and watched the place become useful. That part mattered. A captured position wasn't just a win. It was a piece on the board. A place to hold, store food, station men, send word from, and force the enemy to respond to. Rob knew that. Ruse knew that. Every man in this place knew it. I rested my hand against Max's neck and looked across the yard. Not bad, I said lightly. Bit cramped, but we can work with it. He huffed. One of the raptors circled around a fallen shield, nudged it once, then lost interest. The Triceratops stood just inside the gate, calm and heavy, like it had always belonged there. Sander walked up beside me, wiping blood from his gauntlet with a piece of cloth he'd taken from someone who no longer needed it. "You're smiling," he said flatly. I glanced at him. "I won a fort in 10 minutes. I think I've earned it." He looked toward the yard. "You didn't win it. Your animals did." I smiled a little wider. "And who brought them?" He grunted. Rob crossed the yard a moment later with Greywind beside him and 2 guards following. Great Jan Umber came as well, and a little behind him, Roose Bolton with that same careful expression that never really changed. Rob stopped a few steps from me. "This place is ours now," he said. I nodded once. "Yet." He looked around the fort again, then back at me. "You said you wanted recognition," he said. "I did. You have it." I tilted my head slightly. "Publicly." He gave me a direct look. "You'll have that too." Great Jan crossed his arms. "Men saw what happened here. They'll speak of it soon enough." "Men always talk," I said. "I prefer official talk. Better structure. Less imagination." Great Jan gave a short sound that might have been amusement. Rob didn't smile. He stayed focused. "What exactly do you intend to do now?" he asked. There it was. I looked over the walls again. Small fort. Good position. Enough surrounding land to work with if I wanted a start, not enough to threaten Rob, which made it easier for him to accept. More importantly, close enough to the war to stay relevant. I looked back at him. "I want territory," I said plainly. The guards behind him shifted slightly. Great Jan frowned. Roose didn't move at all. Rob held my gaze. "Who's this?" I said, gesturing around us. That got a stronger reaction. Great Jan spoke first. "This hold belongs to the north now." I looked at him. "And I'm offering to keep it useful for the north." He didn't like the wording. "That's not the same thing," he said. "No," I agreed. "It's better." Sander let out a quiet breath beside me. Rob looked at the broken gate, then at the walls, then at Max. "You want me to give this to you," he said. I shrugged slightly. "Loan it. Grant it. Name it. Pick a word you like. I need land." Roose Bolton finally spoke, his voice quiet and controlled. "And if granted, you would hold it under your own banner." "Obviously," I said. Great Jan looked at Rob. "He's not one of ours." "No," I said before Rob could answer. "That's why this works." Great Jan turned his attention back to me. "You expect the king in the north to hand land to a stranger because he broke a gate?" I smiled faintly. "Not just because I broke the gate. Because I can keep breaking them." He stared at me. Rob raised a hand slightly, cutting off whatever Great Jan was about to say next. I looked back at Rob. "You need pressure on the Lannisters," I said. "You need men talking about victories. You need places that stay taken. I need a foothold." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, and if I refuse?" I spread one hand slightly. "Then I still help, because I said I would. But this would be easier if we stop pretending that temporary arrangements aren't arrangements." Roos watched me closely at that. He understood exactly what I was doing. Rob did too. Good. Grey Wind gave a low sound, not aimed at Max this time, just restless. Max didn't react. I kept my tone light. Look, I'm not asking for Winterfell. I'm asking for the broken thing we just cleaned out. Sander muttered, very humble. I ignored him. Great Jan looked at Rob again. If he holds it, he holds it for you. I cut in immediately. No. I hold it allied to him. Great Jan looked at me sharply. You don't make terms here. I do if I'm the one making the place hard to take, I said calmly. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Rob exhaled slowly. You want an alliance, he said. I do. You want land? Yes. And you intend to build something here? I smiled a little. Now you're getting it. He didn't react to that. He looked at Roos. Roos said, it keeps him close. It gives him reason to commit further. Great Jan frowned. And gives him walls. Roos glanced at him. He already has monsters. That ended that. Rob looked at me again. You will hold this place, he said. You will hold it as an allied ruler under terms agreed between us. You do not answer to my bannermen. You do not raise war against my men. You do not interfere with my command. I nodded once. Easy. You support my campaign when called. I do. And if you break terms? I won't, I said. He paused, then gave a small nod. Then it's settled. The moment the words landed. Ding! I kept my face still. Inside, I felt a quick jolt of surprise. I'd expected the land part first. A panel appeared in front of me, visible only to me. Task complete, form an alliance with a kingdom. I blinked once. Then almost laughed. Right. Of course. Not land first. Alliance first. Technically Rob had just made it official. That actually made sense. I kept my expression neutral and just said, good. Great Jan clearly thought I was responding to Rob. Rob gave a short nod. I focused inward on the panel. Reward, spin available. Now that helped. Very much. I stepped back half a pace and rolled one shoulder like I was loosening armor. Give me a second, I said casually. Sander gave me a look. You always need a second when no one else can see what you're doing. I smiled. Maybe I'm complicated. You're annoying, he replied. I focused on the spin. The wheel appeared, turning fast. Names flashed by. Bigger predators. Flyers. Herd animals. Things I wanted. Things I didn't need yet. Then it slowed. Stopped. Reward, 150 on Shiornis. My eyebrows lifted. Then I smiled. Oh, that is fantastic, I said quietly. Great Jan frowned. What is? I shook my head lightly. Nothing you need to worry about. He looked irritated, but I was already stepping aside. On Shiornis. Small, feathered, quick, ideal for scouting and making a place feel alive. Not for battle. Not for this kind of war. But for territory. For information. For atmosphere. Perfect. Very perfect. I looked toward the open stretches behind the fort and thought it through immediately. Yes. Spread them wide. Keep them around the perimeter, the woods, the approach roads, the walls. Eyes everywhere. Not soldiers. Not battle assets. Territory creatures. That put me in a good mood immediately. Rob was still watching me. You look pleased. I am, I said honestly. With what? I smiled. Future planning. He accepted the answer about as much as anyone ever did, which was not much, but he moved on. You said this place needed a name, he said. I looked around the fort again. It does. Great Jan folded his arms. And what would you call it? I thought for a second, then shook my head. Later. I'll know it when I hear it. Sander muttered, that's not how names work. Sure it is, I said. Rob turned slightly and gave instructions to one of his men. Send word. This fort is held by our ally. The one with the beasts. I smiled a little. There it was again. Public recognition. Rumors. Ravens. Men talking at every fire between here and the next campaign move. Very useful. I watched the messenger leave. Then another ding sounded. That one I had expected. I kept my posture relaxed. A new panel appeared. Task complete, secure territory to establish your kingdom. Reward, spin available. There we go. I let out a small breath through my nose and looked around the fort again with a very different feeling. Mine. Not in theory. Not in a someday way. Not in a plan on paper way. Mine now. Walls, ground, stores, approach lines, outer land. A base. I had actually pulled it off. That felt good. Very good. I focused on the spin. The wheel returned, turning with the same blur of names and silhouettes. It slowed harder this time, then stopped. Reward, 1 Tyrannosaurus Rex. I grinned immediately. Okay, I said under my breath, happy enough that some of it slipped into my face. Sander glanced at me. You look worse every minute. I laughed once. No, this is great. A T-Rex. Now that was battle material. Big. Direct. Terrifying in the exact way Westeros needed to see. Not subtle. Not useful for walls or stealth. But for war and reputation? Perfect. I already knew I'd bring him into battle. No question. Not to patrol the territory. Not to sit behind stone. Into battle with me. I shifted my weight and looked outward beyond the walls again. Then another panel appeared before I even had to think about it. Task complete, get 10% of the world to know of your kingdom. I blinked. Really? That one surprised me more. Then I thought through it. Rob's public acknowledgement. The battle. A fort taken in minutes by beasts no one had ever seen. Northern soldiers talking. Ravens going out. Lannister survivors spreading the same story from the other side. Tales moving faster because they were unbelievable. I exhaled and nodded slightly. All right. Fine. I'll take it. Roose was looking at me now with quiet attention, probably because I'd spoken aloud again. I gave him a small smile. He did not return it. The panel continued. Reward, spin available. Now that was fast progress. I spun again. The wheel flashed by and slowed. Stopped. Reward, 200 Compsognathus. I stared for half a second. Then laughed. Not the battle prize I would have picked, but still useful. Very useful. Small, quick, numerous. Territory creatures again. Not something I'd drag into open war, but excellent for filling the land, cleaning scraps, harassing intruders, and making it very clear that this place was not normal. I was extremely happy with that. Honestly, way happier than I should have looked in front of a war council and half a captured fort, but I didn't care. I could already see it in my head. Onchiornis and Compis spread through the woods, along the walls, in the brush, by the streams and paths. Constant motion. Constant life. Territory that felt occupied from the ground up. Not by men alone. By dinosaurs. Now that was a kingdom start. Then the panel shifted again. Kingdom quest complete. Special spin available. My smile widened. Now we're talking, I said quietly. Rob had turned back by then. Talking about what? I looked at him and shrugged. Administrative success. Great Jan looked openly annoyed. I dislike him. Sanders said, get in line. I focused on the special spin. The wheel that appeared this time was different. Brighter. Slower to start. Bigger rewards. Interesting. Very interesting. It spun, then slowed in heavy clicks before stopping. Special reward, pack of 16 raptors. I stared for a second. Then let out a low whistle. Wow, I said softly, genuinely impressed. 16. A whole pack. That changed pressure. Territory control. Hunting range. Fear factor. Mobility. Not all for battle at once maybe, but the option being there was huge. I glanced at my 2 Utahraptors, then mentally at the idea of 16 more raptors in this place. Patrols. Outer approaches. Rapid response. A kingdom that moved even when I wasn't looking directly at it. That was excellent. Then one more panel appeared. Kingdom 2. 1. Get 25% of the world to know of your kingdom. 2. Increase territory size. 3. Get 10,000 people in your kingdom. I looked at the tasks and smiled slowly. Bigger. Much bigger. Recognition, expansion, population. Now we had scale. Now I wasn't just making a hold with dinosaurs around it. I was building an actual kingdom. That thought landed cleanly in my head. A dinosaur kingdom. Simple. Direct. Mine. No elaborate fantasy around it. No need to pretend it was something else. That was the goal now. Build the kingdom, make it known, make it real enough that no one could ignore it. I liked that a lot. I stepped away from the group a little, mostly so I could think without Great Jan staring at me like he wanted to throw me off the walls. The ground outside the inner yard opened into scrub, broken fencing, patches of brush, low trees. Good enough. I let the summons happen. Quietly at first. A handful of Onchiornis appeared near the brush. Small. Feathered. Quick. Then more. Then more. A flood of small forms settling into the land, hopping, gliding short distances, vanishing into cover, moving along stone edges and ruined fencing. I smiled immediately. Yes, I said softly. That is exactly what I wanted. They spread naturally, not clustering around me for long, already moving outward. Good instincts. They wouldn't be coming to battle with me. No reason to risk them. They belonged here. A moment later, I released the Compis as well. That was a very different kind of movement. Tiny bodies. Fast feet. A wave of small reptilian shapes moving through grass, under carts, along shallow ditches, between stones and wood piles. 200 of them changed the feeling of the ground itself in seconds. I laughed under my breath, pleased enough that I couldn't really hide it. Okay, I said. This place is alive now. One of the nearby northern soldiers flinched when a compy darted past his boot. What in the... Another pointed toward the low wall. There's more of them. Great Jan turned sharply. What have you done now? I looked back over my shoulder. Improved local security. He stared at the spreading creatures, then at me. Those tiny things are your idea of security. Part of it, I said. Ruse watched them fan out with quiet interest. They spread quickly. Exactly, I replied. Rob looked out across the movement, his expression controlled but clearly assessing. They stay here. Yes, I said. They're for the territory. He nodded once. Good. Then I felt the new presence behind me before I turned. Heavy footfalls. A different kind of weight from Max. I turned and looked up. The T-Rex stood near the broken gate, broad-headed and massive, its size immediately pulling every eye in the yard. Bigger in a different way than Max. Simpler. Cleaner. Pure battle pressure. A few men backed up on instinct. Grey wind stiffened. Max turned his head toward it, watchful. The T-Rex let out a low, deep sound. I grinned. Yeah, I said softly. You're coming with me. Sander looked from the T-Rex to me. Of course it's bigger. I shrugged. I have excellent luck. He gave me a flat stare. That's not luck. No. I said. Feels like luck. Before anyone could ask more questions, I released the raptor pack. 16 more. They appeared in staggered positions just beyond the wall line and inner yard, immediately alert, immediately mobile, their bodies low and coordinated in a way that was obvious even to men who knew nothing about them. The effect on the camp around the fort was immediate. Northern soldiers stopped. Several raised weapons by reflex. I lifted one hand. Relax. The raptors didn't rush anyone. They moved outward, spreading in pairs and small groups, testing the perimeter, watching everything. Good. Very good. I wasn't leaving all of them to battle either, not all the time. Some would stay to secure the territory. Some could come with me later when needed. The option mattered. Great Jan looked like he was half a breath from calling this madness. Rob stepped forward first instead. You control all of them, he said. I looked at him. Yeah. His eyes moved over the walls, the yards, the little feathered shapes in the distance, the Compy's undercarts, the raptors spreading out, the T-Rex near the gate, Max by my side, the Triceratops still planted like a living barricade. This place will hold, he said. I smiled. That's the idea. Ruse said quietly, men will talk even more now. I glanced at him. Perfect. He held my gaze a moment, then gave a slight nod. That was enough. I turned slowly, taking in all of it. The fort. The land around it. The movement. The sound. The actual beginning of something that hadn't existed this morning. This was no longer just a captured place in a war. This was a start. A real one. And I had work to do. I looked back at Rob. We'll need people eventually, I said. Builders. Keepers. Farmers. Men who can work around all this without screaming every 5 minutes. Great Jan said, that last part may be difficult. I smiled at him. I'm flexible. Rob nodded once. Win more ground. Hold what you have. Men follow strength. I knew that already. Still, hearing him say it helped. I looked toward the wall where some of the Onchiornis had already perched, watching the roads. Then toward the brush where Compys vanished in quick little streaks. Then at the raptors as they spread wider. Then at the T-Rex again. I was still extremely happy about that one. Sander noticed. You like the ugly one? I looked at the T-Rex. I like all of them. That one most. Maybe. He grunted. I stepped up onto a low section of stone and looked out over the territory that now answered to me. Not much yet. Enough to matter. Enough to start. And the next goals were clear. Get more of the world to know my kingdom. Increase the territory size. Get 10,000 people into it. Large goals. Manageable goals. The kind worth doing. I rolled my shoulders once and hopped back down. All right, I said lightly. No one burns my walls, no one steals my food, and anyone from the Lannisters who tries this place again is going to have a very bad day. Great Jan gave a rough laugh at that despite himself. Rob did not laugh, but there was the smallest shift in his expression, close enough to approval to count. Then he turned back toward the gate. I returned to camp before dark. I nodded. Send word when you want something broken. He looked at me over his shoulder. I will. Arya had come up quietly by then with Gendry and Hot Pie close behind. She looked around the fort and all the creatures with a narrowed, thinking expression. This is yours now, she said. Yeah, I replied. Hot Pie stared at the compis near a broken barrel. There's so many of the little ones. 200, I said. He stared at me. Why do you know that? I smiled faintly. I keep count. Gendry looked toward the walls, where a few Onchiornis had already settled. And the feathered ones? Not for battle, I said. Those stay here. Arya looked at the T-Rex near the gate and then at me. That one doesn't look like it stays here. I grinned. No. That one goes with me. Chapter 12, A Name on the Road. The fort was busy by the time I decided to leave it. That was good. Men moved along the walls. Stores were being counted. A few of Rob's soldiers remained behind temporarily to make the transfer clean and keep the place stable while word spread. My own creatures had already changed the feel of the ground. Onchiornis flashed in quick feathered bursts along the outer scrub and low trees. Compis moved under carts, across loose stone, through brush and ruined fencing. The new raptor pack had spread wide enough that I only saw some of them at any one moment, but I could feel their presence in the movement around the perimeter. Max remained close. The Triceratops held the gate. The T-Rex stood not far from the wall, calm and heavy and very visible. I liked all of it. I stood in the center yard with Arya, Gendry, Hot Pie, Sander, and a few of Rob's men nearby while I looked over the place one more time. All right, I said lightly, clapping my hands once. This works. Sander looked around the yard. You say that about everything. Only when I'm right, I replied. He grunted. Arya had been watching the walls and all the creatures moving through and over them. She looked back at me. You're leaving? Yeah, I said. She frowned slightly. You just got this place. Exactly, I said. And now it needs a name, a banner, and people hearing about it. Gendry crossed his arms. You could stay and build it first. I smiled a little. You don't start by hiding. You start by making noise. Hot Pie looked nervous at that. Usually noise means trouble. I gave him an easy look. That's because you're making the wrong kind. Rob had already returned to his own camp, but he'd left a few men behind to mark the agreement and help establish the line between his authority and mine until it settled into something everyone understood. One of those men, a lean northerner with a scar along his jaw, stepped forward slightly. King Rob asked what name he should send with the next raven, he said. That stopped me for a second. Right. Name. A proper one. One that would travel. One that would survive retelling. One that sounded real enough that men would repeat it without laughing. People here had no idea what a dinosaur was. No reference. No context. The word itself would sound like a title, a place, a strange Eastern thing, maybe. Good. That worked for me. I looked up toward the wall where a few Onchiornis perched and then toward Max. A kingdom after dinosaurs. Simple. Then the house. Also simple. I turned back to the man. Tell him this, I said. The kingdom is called Dinosaur. He blinked. Sander looked at me slowly. That's the name. Yeah, I said. He stared at me. Dinosaur. I smiled slightly. Strong, direct, memorable. I'm doing everyone a favor. The northerner still looked uncertain. And your house? House Dinosaur, I said. Hot Pie blinked hard. That sounds made up. I looked at him. All house names were made up by someone. Sander gave a short, rough sound that was almost a laugh. Arya looked at me with narrowed eyes. That's really the name. Yeah, I said. House Dinosaur. Kingdom of Dinosaur. Gendry frowned. That's strange. I shrugged. And yet you'll remember it. He opened his mouth, thought about it, then closed it again. Exactly. The northerner nodded slowly, still not entirely convinced but smart enough not to argue. I'll send the word. Good, I said. Spell it however you want as long as people say it right. He gave me a blank look. Sander muttered, you don't know how they'll spell it. They'll figure it out, I replied. I looked around the yard again and then toward the gate. I'm taking Max, the T-Rex, and some of the raptors, I said. Triceratops stays. Onchiornis stay. Compys stay. Most of the new raptor pack stays too. Arya looked toward the gate. You're going alone? I smiled. Not really. She looked past me toward Max and then farther toward the T-Rex. Right. Gendry shifted his stance. How many are you taking? I thought for a second. Max, the T-Rex, and 6 raptors. Hot Pie stared. That still sounds like a lot. It is a lot, I said happily. That's why it works. Sander looked at me. And me. I glanced at him. That depends. You coming? He looked bored. This place is full of little creatures and northern men. The road sounds better. I nodded once. Good choice. Arya's expression tightened slightly. I'm not staying either. That made Gendry look at her. Arya. She looked back at him. I'm not. Hot Pie immediately looked unhappy. Can't we stay one night? No, Arya said. I watched them for a moment and then lifted a hand casually. All right, group discussion. Let's make this easy. Sander folded his arms. Arya looked irritated already. Gendry looked like he was bracing for something. Hot Pie just looked tired. I pointed lightly at the fort. This place is safe enough for now. Then I pointed northward and westward in a loose motion. Roads are not. Arya didn't back down. That's why I'm not staying here. I tilted my head slightly. You're trying to get somewhere. I'm trying to get known. Those are different jobs. She frowned. I can still travel. Yes, I said. You can. But not with me for this part. That made her jaw tighten. Gendry looked between us. Why not? I gestured toward Max and then toward where the T-Rex stood near the gate. Because I'm not doing subtle travel. I'm doing visible travel. Lords, roads, villages, rumor chains. I'm making sure every person between here and the next dozen holdfasts knows the name. Hot Pie looked toward the T-Rex and swallowed. Yeah. That would do it. Arya didn't like being told no. I could see it immediately. That doesn't matter, she said. I'm still coming. I met her eyes. No, I said, still calm. Sander glanced at me and then at her, clearly interested now. Arya's voice sharpened. You don't decide for me. I nodded once. Usually true. I pointed toward the fort again. Right now, though, I'm deciding who rides into open roads under my banner while I start making lords nervous. That's not you. Her hand moved slightly near her side. I noticed. Sander noticed too. I kept my tone easy. You can hate that all you want. It's still a bad idea. She glared at me. I let a second pass. Then I softened it just a little. Stay here a short while. Rob's men know you're here. You've got walls. Food. Gendry and Hot Pie are with you. Sander and I go make trouble. Then we circle back. She didn't answer. Gendry looked at her. He's right. She shot him a look. He held it. Hot Pie nodded quickly. He is. Very right. Extremely right. Arya looked away from all of us, angry in that tight, contained way she had when she knew the argument wasn't going her way. I didn't push. Didn't need to. After a few more seconds, she said, fine. Hot Pie let out a breath. Gendry relaxed slightly. I smiled faintly. Good talk. Arya glared again. Don't start celebrating, she said. Wouldn't dream of it, I said lightly. Sander muttered, you absolutely would. Maybe a little. I turned toward the scar-jawed northerner again. Until I'm back, I said, the fort holds. No one touches my creatures unless they want problems. No one kills the little ones because they're curious or stupid. He nodded immediately. Understood. I glanced at the Triceratops by the gate. And if anyone tries the walls, let the big one meet them first. Hot Pie looked at the Triceratops, then at me. You really remember all of them? Of course I do, I said. I stepped toward the gate. Max moved first, instantly falling in beside me. The T-Rex lifted its head and turned as I approached, that huge jaw parting slightly before closing again. 6 of the raptors emerged from different angles of the perimeter, sliding back toward the main path in an easy, coordinated flow. That got another reaction from the northerners. One of them said under his breath, 7 save us. I smiled to myself. No one here had language for any of this. That helped me. The less they could categorize it, the more it would spread as something bigger. Good. Very good. I stopped near the gate and looked back once. Arya stood near the center of the yard with her arms crossed, Gendry beside her, Hot Pie behind them both. She looked irritated, but she also looked safer than she had on the road. That mattered. Sander came up next to me. You've made yourself a little castle, he said. A fort, I corrected. He looked at the walls. Barely. I glanced at him. Jealous? No. Understandable. He gave me a flat stare. I laughed once and then climbed up onto Max's back. The T-Rex moved when I gave it a look. The raptors spread out into a rough forward screen. Sander walked. We headed out. The road away from the fort was rougher than the one we'd come in on, less used and more broken by recent movement. Mud patches, cart scars, horse tracks, the kind of signs war left behind everywhere without effort. I kept us moving at a visible pace, not too fast. Speed mattered less than being seen. That was the point now. Get 25% of the world to know the kingdom. Increase territory size. Get 10,000 people. The last one was a long game. The first 2 were not. I kept the numbers clear in my head while Max moved under me and the T-Rex followed with heavy steps that made the road itself feel smaller. "This is going to be fun," I said. Sander looked ahead. "For you." "For everyone," I replied. "Some of them just won't know it yet." He grunted. We reached the first cluster of civilians before midday. A broken cart on the side of the road. A woman, 2 older men, and a boy trying to get a wheel back on badly enough that I could tell they'd been at it for a while. They noticed the raptors first. That always happened with people who were paying attention. Then Max. Then the T-Rex. Everything stopped. The boy dropped the tool in his hand. One of the old men stumbled backward. The woman pulled the boy closer immediately. Sander kept walking like none of it mattered. I slowed Max and stopped a comfortable distance away. "Relax," I said calmly. Nobody relaxed. "Fair." I smiled a little anyway. "You're fine." The woman looked terrified. "What are you?" I tilted my head. "That seems rude." Sander muttered, "You asked for it." I ignored him and pointed casually at the cart. "Wheels set wrong." One of the old men stared at me like I was insane. "Set wrong?" "Yeah," I said. "Lift angles off." I slid down from Max's back. That did not make them feel better. One of the raptors moved slightly closer. The boy made a noise. I raised a hand without looking at it. "Stay." It stayed. Good. I walked toward the cart. Nobody scream. It's a lot of noise for very little payoff. The older men didn't move. I grabbed the edge of the cart, shifted the balance, and nudged the wheel alignment with my boot. "Now," I said, "push." They didn't. I looked up at them. "Come on," I said. "I'm helping." The older one nearest me swallowed and pushed. The wheel settled properly onto the axle slot. "There," I said, stepping back. He stared at it, then at me. "You fixed it." "Yeah," I replied. "Try not to make it a spiritual event." Sander gave a rough breath beside me. The woman looked from me to the creatures behind me. "Why?" I shrugged. "Because you were in front of me and it took 10 seconds. The boy peeked around her arm and stared openly at Max. "What are they called?" he asked quietly. There it was. Perfect. I smiled at him. "Dinosaurs." He blinked. No. "Dinosaurs," I repeated. The woman tightened her hold on him. "What kind of word is that?" "The correct one," I said. One of the old men looked at the T-Rex and said nervously, "And that one?" "Also a dinosaur," I replied. "Different model." Sander looked at me. "Model." I waved a hand lightly. "You know what I mean." The boy kept staring. "Do they bite?" "Yes," I said honestly. "Don't bother them." He nodded immediately. I let that sit for a second, then added, "You can tell people House Dinosaur came through here." The old man frowned. "House? House Dinosaur," I said. "And the Kingdom of Dinosaur." Sander closed his eyes for half a second like he regretted being alive. The woman stared. "That is your house?" "Yeah." "That is your kingdom?" "Yeah." She looked confused enough to be useful. Confusion spread stories faster than certainty. The old man repeated slowly, "House Dinosaur." I smiled. "See? Already memorable." I climbed back onto Max. "Safe travels," I said. And we moved on. After a minute, Sander said, "That's your strategy." I looked down at him. "One of them. You stop by peasants, fix carts, and tell them your absurd house name." I nodded. "Exactly." He gave me a long look. "You're serious?" "Completely." He shook his head once. "Idiot." "Efficient idiot," I corrected. He didn't answer. We crossed 2 more roads by afternoon and got even better results. At one crossing, a pair of mounted men wearing minor house colors saw us from a distance, froze, then turned their horses around so fast one nearly threw his rider. I made sure to call after them. "Tell your lord House Dinosaur says hello." They did not answer, which was fine. They would absolutely repeat it. At another hamlet, I didn't even have to stop. People poured out of buildings to stare. A dog barked itself hoarse at one of the raptors. The T-Rex turned its head once and the dog immediately stopped and hid behind a barrel. That made me smile. I raised my voice just enough to carry. "I'm the ruler of the kingdom of Dinosaur," I said clearly. "This road is safe while I'm on it." The villagers just stared. A man near a trough said, "The kingdom of what?" "Dinosaur," I repeated. He looked even more confused. "Spell it later," I said, and kept moving. By the time we reached a market road near dusk, I was in an even better mood. People saw us from much farther off there. Traders, peddlers, drovers, riders carrying messages, and a handful of hedge knights with more nerves than discipline. Everyone stopped. Nobody approached first. This time, I made the approach count. I guided Max right into the center of the road and stopped with the T-Rex looming behind and the raptors spread left and right. That created immediate silence. Perfect. I looked over the crowd. "No one panic," I said pleasantly. "I'm in a good mood." No one relaxed. One trader licked his lips and said, "Who are you?" I smiled at him. "Leader of House Dinosaur. Founder of the Kingdom of Dinosaur." There was a pause. Then a knight in worn mail said, "That's no house I've heard of." "Good," I said. "Now you have." He looked irritated and nervous at the same time. Another man asked, "What are those creatures?" "Dinosaurs," I replied. A woman with a cart of onions crossed herself and whispered something under her breath. I spread one hand slightly. "Go ahead and tell everyone you meet. Saves me time." Sanders stood off to the side of Max, arms loose, clearly not interested in helping but also not stopping me. One merchant looked from Max to the T-Rex and then to me. "Are you mad?" I smiled. "A little. But in a productive way." That did not help him. A younger rider said, "You from Essos?" "No," I said. "From my own territory." "Where?" I pointed behind me in the rough direction of the fort. "There." He frowned. "That's not a kingdom. Not with that attitude." Sander made a rough sound that might have been a laugh again. Good. He was enjoying this more than he wanted to admit. I kept speaking just long enough to make sure every person there had the name clearly in their head. Then we moved on. As the light lowered, I thought back briefly over the timeline. Blackwater had already turned. The wildfire had burned bright, but the tide of that battle changed when Tywin Lannister arrived with the Tyrells. That was the moment it was decided. Not the fire itself. Not the defense alone. The arrival. The force. The alliance. Everyone in the realm would be talking about that too. Which meant the roads were full of fresh rumor already, and all I had to do was make sure my name got caught in the same stream. That made this easier. War carried names for free. I just had to attach mine to something no one could ignore. A T-Rex on a road tended to help with that. I looked down at Sander. "You know what's nice about politics?" He looked unimpressed already. "No." You can do most of it by making sure people tell the story for you. He gave me a sidelong glance. That's not politics. That's frightening peasants. I considered it. Both can be true. He shook his head. We stopped near a stream just after nightfall. I didn't make a camp in the usual sense. No fire. No tent. No real need. Max settled first. The T-Rex remained standing for a while before lowering gradually. The raptors spread out into a rough perimeter. Sander sat on a fallen log, sharpening his blade with the same expression he used for everything. I crouched near the stream, washed my hands, and looked at my reflection for a second before glancing at the dark water moving past. House Dinosaur. Kingdom of Dinosaur. It sounded ridiculous. It also worked. No one would forget it. I was still pleased with that. Sander spoke without looking up. You smiling again? I splashed water lightly off my fingers. I'm building something. It'd be weird if I looked miserable. Most lords do. I'm not most lords. That, at least, he didn't argue with. I sat back on my heels and looked over at Max. Then the T-Rex. Then the raptors scattered through the dark edges beyond them. The next steps were straightforward enough. More roads. More names hearing mine. More villages and lesser lords. Maybe a small house or landed knight foolish enough to test me in public. That would help too. Territory increase would come with pressure and opportunity. Population would take work. But this part. This I could do quickly. The first thing in Westeros that really mattered was being known. Once people knew your name, they fit you into the board even if they hated it. Even if they didn't understand you. Even if they wanted you gone. I already had the fort. I already had the alliance. Now I just needed reach. I stood up again and stretched once. Sander looked at me. We moving at first light? Yeah, I said. I want at least 3 more roads tomorrow. He looked away. Of course you do. I smiled and went to rest against Max's side, one hand on the familiar roughness of his scales. He huffed softly and shifted just enough to make room. That felt right. A giant murder dog from another life, now too large for reason, lying beside me in a conquered fort's outer territory while feathered scouts and little scavengers infested the land behind us and a T-Rex waited for morning. Honestly, things were going very well. Chapter 13, A Wedding to Ruin. I woke to a ding. Not fully. Not all at once. I was half asleep against Max's side, one arm folded under my head, the ground still cool from the night. The sound cut through that heavy early morning fog in my head and pulled my eyes open before I was ready to move. For a second I just stared ahead at the dim light coming through the trees. Then the panel appeared. Mission, stop the Red Wedding. I blinked once. Then I sat up fast. Oh, I said quietly, waking up all the way. Right. Max lifted his head immediately and made a low sound. Sander, sitting a short distance away with his back against a tree, looked over without much interest. What? I rubbed my face with one hand and let out a breath through my nose. Nothing. Bad memory management. He frowned slightly. You make less sense when you wake up. False, I said. I make perfect sense. I'm just thinking. I looked back at the panel. Mission details, prevent the deaths at the Red Wedding. That did it. Any leftover sleep was gone. I already knew the timeline. I knew the chain that led there. Robb marrying Talisa in the show version. Valder Frey insulted and angry. Roose Bolton positioning himself. Tywin pushing the right people. The wedding at the twins. Crossbows. Locked doors. Catelyn. Robb. Northern lords cut down inside and outside. Grey wind trapped. Slaughter everywhere. I had nearly let it sit too far back in my mind because the day-to-day had been full enough already. Blackwater. Rob. The fort. The kingdom. Roads. Rumors. But the Red Wedding was not something I could shrug off and fix later. If I was going to stop it, I needed to move before it was a surprise to anyone except the people planning it. I stood up and rolled my shoulders once. Okay. Sander watched me. That usually means trouble. It means planning, I said. He looked unconvinced. Same thing. I glanced at Max, then toward where the T-Rex rested, then to the raptors spread through the edge of the dark trees. Red Wedding. The first thing I needed was Rob closer. Not just allied to me on paper. Close enough that when the time came, I could be present or near enough to hit the twins fast. The second thing I needed was a believable reason to stay in his orbit without making myself look desperate or strange. The third thing I needed was force positioned for exactly the right type of breach. The plan itself settled into place almost immediately. When it happened, I would not try to stop the betrayal by talking Valder Frey down. That was useless. I would not trust Bolton. Also useless. I would break the event open. The Triceratops and the T-Rex would smash through guards and outer resistance. Max and I would go inside and pull out the people who mattered. Fast. Direct. Ugly. Effective. That part was easy. Getting to the right moment cleanly was harder. I walked a few slow steps away from the stream, thinking. Sander stood up. You pacing now? Important pacing, I replied. He came closer, looking more awake now. You going to explain anything? I looked at him. I remembered something unpleasant. That narrows it down to the world. Fair. I glanced at Max, who was already standing. Good. Always good. Then I looked back at Sander. I need to get near Rob again, I said. He stared at me. You just left him. I know. So now we go back. Yes. He gave me a flat look. You're annoying. I smiled slightly. And yet, here you are. He grunted and looked away. I kept talking while I thought through the details. There's going to be a wedding. He looked back at me. Your face says you hate that. I do, I said. This one especially. He crossed his arms. Who's getting married? Rob. That got a more direct reaction. His eyes narrowed slightly. The boy king. Yeah. To who? I paused. That part's complicated. He gave me a look that said it had better stop being complicated quickly. Short version, I said, it ends badly. He was quiet for a second. Then, you know this how? I smiled faintly. I pay attention. He did not believe that answer at all, but he didn't press yet. Instead he said, and your plan? I nodded once. When it happens, I break it. With what? I pointed lightly toward the T-Rex. That. Then toward the direction back to my territory in my head. And the Triceratops. Then I rested my hand on Max's side. And me and him go inside. Sander stared at me. You plan to charge into a wedding. A bad wedding, I corrected. That's not better. It is for the people not getting murdered. He went quiet at that. Not because he suddenly approved. More because the wording landed hard enough to make him consider it. I kept going. There'll be guards outside, I said. More inside. Crossbows. Doors shut. Chaos once it starts. He looked at me steadily now, measuring. You sound like you've seen it. I kept my expression relaxed. I sound like I think ahead. He didn't like the answer, but he let it go for now. I crouched near the stream again and splashed water across my face. Cold. Helpful. First thing, I said, standing again, we go back. To your fort. And Rob's camp after that, I said. I need to stay close enough to the line of movement that I can step in without making it obvious why I'm there. Sander frowned slightly. That doesn't sound like your usual style. I smiled a little. I can do subtle when I'm motivated. No, he said flatly. You can't. I laughed once. Okay, fair. Max huffed softly. I scratched the side of his neck. You're with me on this one, buddy. He leaned into the touch slightly. The T-Rex rose fully a moment later, heavy and calm, while the raptors began sliding back in from the perimeter once I started moving with purpose. I looked at all of them and thought it through again. The Triceratops would have to come from the fort when the time neared. No reason to drag it across every road right now if I needed it fresh and positioned later. Max stayed with me. The T-Rex too. Selected raptors as support if needed. Not inside the hall. Outside. Disruption. Confusion. Outer courtyard. Escape routes. I already knew the broad outcome I wanted. Rob and Catalin alive. Northern Core not butchered at the table. Grey Wind not trapped. The moment ruined before it turned into a massacre. The hard part would be timing. I started walking. Sander fell in beside me without needing anything else said. We were barely back on the road before he spoke again. This wedding, he said. When? Not yet, I answered. But soon enough that I'm not ignoring it. He looked ahead. And you're certain? Yet. That answer came too fast, too flat. He noticed. You always this sure? Mostly, I said. He gave me a side glance. That's not normal. Neither is any of this, I said, gesturing casually to Max, the T-Rex, and the raptors. That was enough to stop that line for a minute. Good. We moved at a steady pace through the morning. I didn't push Max too hard because I needed time to think, not just arrive. The road gave me that. Broken fence lines. Low hills. Patches of trees. A burned farmhouse in the distance that no one had rebuilt yet. 2 crows on a road marker. The usual damage of war. I kept sorting the problem into manageable pieces. Step 1, stay tied to Rob's campaign and know where he's headed. Step 2, learn where the fray reconciliation is forming and when. Step 3, keep heavy force close enough to hit the twins hard. Step 4, intervene the second the music changes and the doors close. That was the simplest version. There were other parts too. Could I prevent the wedding before it happened by warning Rob? Maybe. But warning him with no proof would raise questions I didn't want. Worse, if he changed the shape of events but still dealt with Valder through pride or pressure, the trap could just move. A different hall. A different feast. A different ambush. No. Better to stay close, gather exact movement, and break the thing in the moment it became real. Ugly, but reliable. Sander noticed I'd gone quiet for too long. You look serious, he said. I glanced at him. I contain layers. You contain nonsense. That too. He grunted. After another stretch of road, he said, you care about this one. It wasn't a question. I answered anyway. Yet. He looked forward. Why? I considered brushing it off. Didn't. Because it's dirty, I said. Feast, guessed right, smiling faces, then knives and bolts. I don't like that. He was quiet. Then, there are worse ways to die. Sure, I said. Still don't like it. That answer seemed to work for him. We reached a fork in the road by midday and stopped long enough for me to think through where I wanted to go first. Back to my territory directly made the most sense. Check the fort. Reposition the Triceratops. Confirm that the Onchiornis and Compys had spread the way I wanted. Make sure the place was holding without me. Then push to rob. I looked at Sander. We go back to the fort first. He nodded once. Good. You miss the little ones. I don't. I smiled slightly. Liar. He looked disgusted with the conversation. Which usually meant I'd hit the truth somewhere. We kept moving. By the time the fort came back into view later in the day, I could tell before I fully saw it that the territory had changed. The Onchiornis were doing exactly what I'd wanted. Small flickers of movement around the outer slopes, the brush, the broken fencing, the low trees near the wall. Not enough to crowd the eye, just enough to suggest constant life. The Compys were harder to track individually, but I saw them in clusters near scraps, under wagons, along drainage dips, slipping between stones and roots. The extra raptors had widened the living perimeter. Very good. I smiled the moment I saw it. That's nice. Sander looked at the walls and the moving shapes around them. It looks worse. That's what I said, I replied happily. Nice. The guards on the wall saw us and reacted fast. Horn call. Men shifting into position. Then recognition. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed. More organized. Less fear. One of the raptors near the gate gave a short sound and moved toward Max. I pointed at it lightly. Still alive, I see. Great work. We entered through the broken then reinforced gate and into the yard. Arya was there before anyone else reached us, crossing the space with that quick, direct stride of hers. Gendry followed. Hot Pie came after them, slower but very obviously interested in whether I'd brought more trouble back with me. You came back, Arya said. Yeah, I replied. She frowned slightly. Quickly. I'm efficient. Sander muttered, he's unbearable. Hot Pie looked at the T-Rex first, then at Max. You still have all of them. All of the current travel set, I said. Yes. Gendry folded his arms. You were only gone a day. Busy day, I replied. Arya narrowed her eyes. Something happened. I looked at her. There was no use pretending she was bad at reading shifts in people. She wasn't. I kept it broad. I remembered something important. What? I shook my head lightly. Not something I'm explaining right now. That did not make her happy. Good thing I didn't need her happy. I walked further into the yard and looked around at the condition of things while we spoke. Men on the wall where they should be. Supplies stacked properly. Onchiornis movement clean. No obvious dead Compys crushed by careless boots. Improvements already visible around the gate. The scar-jawed northerner approached and gave a short nod. The fort holds. Good, I said. Word spread fast, he added. Travelers are already using the name. I smiled. House Dinosaur. He still looked a little uncertain saying it. House Dinosaur. There you go, I said. Sander rolled his eyes. The guard continued, men from Rob's camp came by. More messages from the king in the north are expected. That helped. I nodded once. Good.